Good morning, everyone. My name is Charles Allen. I'm the Ward 6 Council member and chair of the Council's Committee on Transportation and the Environment. Today is Thursday, February 27th, 2025. We are meeting in room 120 of the historic John A. Wilson building, as well as on the Zoom virtual platform. The time is now 9:38 a.m., and I'm calling to order this public oversight hearing of the committee. Today, our performance oversight hearings will include hearing from government witnesses for the following agencies: the Green Finance Authority, the Commission on Climate Change and Resiliency, the DC Sustainable Energy Utility, and the Department of Energy and Environment. Briefly, let me describe each one. The Green Finance Authority, also known as the DC Green Bank, was created to provide access to capital to grow the clean economy and develop a more equitable, resilient, and sustainable district. It offers innovative financing solutions for this purpose and focuses its investments on solar energy, greener and more efficient buildings, infrastructure resilience, and transportation electrification. The mission of the Commission on Climate Change and Resiliency, or the CCCR, is to address the challenges posed by climate change and enhance the resilience of the district by developing recommendations for strategies, policies, and initiatives to mitigate the impacts of climate change. It works to promote sustainability, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and ensure that the city's infrastructure, communities, and natural resources are prepared to withstand and adapt to the effects of climate change. Additionally, the Commission engages with stakeholders and conducts research to support informed decision-making and effective climate action in the district. The DC Sustainable Energy Utilities mission is to help residents, businesses, and institutions in the district achieve energy efficiency, reduce their energy consumption, and increase their use of clean and renewable energy sources. The DC SEU offers a range of programs and services, including rebates, incentives, technical assistance, and education to support energy conservation and sustainability efforts across the district. By partnering with local stakeholders and implementing innovative solutions, the DC SEU aims to enhance environmental quality, lower energy costs, and promote economic development in the district. And the Department of Energy and Environment, or DOEE, is the district's leading agency for energy and environmental issues. The agency's mission is to improve the quality of life for residents of the district by protecting and restoring the environment, conserving natural resources, mitigating pollution, increasing access to clean energy, and educating the public on achieving a sustainable future. DOEE has wide-ranging responsibilities, including enforcing environmental regulations, monitoring and assessing environmental risks, developing energy policies, issuing permits, and providing funding, technical assistance, and information to residents and businesses in the district. While today's hearing will focus on government witnesses, please note the committee will be accepting written testimony from the public until the close of business on March 7th, 2025, and the individuals are encouraged to submit testimony through the council's hearing management system and can be found on the council's website at lims.dccouncil.gov/hearings. Now, for today, we're going to break up our government witnesses into two panels, beginning with the Commission on Climate Change and Resiliency and the Green Finance Authority. After that, we'll then turn to the DC SEU and DOEE. So with that, let's turn to our panel of government witnesses. So let me have Uwe Brandes, who's the chair of the Commission on Climate Change and Resiliency, and Tricia Miller, the CEO of the Green Finance Authority. Now I'm going to swear both of you in, and then I'll turn to each of you for your testimony, and then we'll go through some questions as well. So if you will, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm on the penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give to the Committee on Transportation and the Environment is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you both very much. I could flip a coin, but I think, Mr. Brandes, I have you actually lined up first, so I'm going to turn to you.
Good morning, Committee Chair Allen, and other members of the Committee on Transportation and the Environment. My name is Uwe Brandes, and it's my honor to serve as the chair of the District of Columbia Commission on Climate Change and Resiliency. Councilmember Allen, I'd like to thank you for your leadership and your leadership and the leadership of the entire DC Council in introducing and passing new legislation, passing strategic budgets, and engaging district residents and citizens in the vital challenge of this issue of climate change in the District of Columbia. Here we are in 2025. In 2006, DOE established our baseline for greenhouse gas emissions. And so we're 19 years into this journey. Your activities and the activities of the council and the mayor have created a goal, 2024, to achieve carbon neutrality in the District of Columbia. Looking back over these last 19 years, we've reduced emissions in the District of Columbia in such a positive way. um, approximately slightly more than 1/3 of the 2006 baseline. If we look forward now to the next 20 years, to meet this legislatively mandated milestone, are we going to be able to meet it? This is the question that we were asking at the commission, trying to understand what are these bigger macro dynamics associated with this very, very important work. And in previous years, I've testified here with you to say that we do experience a bit of a paradox in the District of Columbia. We are a demonstrated global leader on these issues. The commission has confirmed that. We have received testimony from stakeholders across the country, indeed around the world, saying that they look to us in the District of Columbia on these matters because of the amazing innovative activities that we have underway. And you'll hear about that all throughout this whole hearing today. But we have a lot of work that we still need to do. Our future success is not solely a matter of the district government itself. It requires the attention and action from all of the government's instrumentalities, certainly our utilities, our regional and federal partners, private sector companies of all sizes, and certainly nonprofit sector organizations all across our city. All of our residents and our visitors to our city are central to this transformation. We're all in this together. Additionally, while we may not like it, in fact, there's a lot not to like. Global emissions have not yet peaked. And so when we think about the impacts of climate change to our city, they're likely to be greater than the assumptions that we've been working with to this date. Underlying all of these themes is a single common decision-making factor, and that is social equity is a through line through this conversation and through these decisions. I'm happy to report that in 2004, all 16 seats of the commission were filled. We met regularly according to our legislative requirements. As of this month, right now, we have 2 open seats on the commission. We're diligently working to fill them. We conducted quarterly public meetings all throughout the year. Some of the themes that we engaged through expert testimony and presentations include the nexus between climate change and mental health, the formation of a DC Youth Climate Council, which we can speak about more today, detailed briefings on bus and vehicle electrification, really exciting work in the sustainable tourism and tourism marketing set of activities, DC's waste management strategy. We've had preliminary conversations, extremely exciting, and I hope we can talk about this regarding the district's next comprehensive plan. And certainly we've spent a lot of time looking at coastal inundation and floodplain mapping issues. Just a few weeks ago, the commission hosted a knowledge forum in preparation for the delivery of our third third report to the council. And we conducted this at MLK Junior Library, fantastic event. We convened diverse voices and perspectives and key leaders from all 8 wards of the city. We had over 200 people participate. Most of those people came for the entire day to participate in a whole range of panels and exploratory conversations. We were really honored and privileged to also host Director Jackson from the Public Service Commission, Commissioner Emil Thompson. We had a terrific keynote from Jason Samanaugh, the lead of the Capitol Weather Gang at the Washington Post, and the indefatigable Brenda Richardson, who joined us in the opening plenary session. We're working diligently on our third report. This is required, mandated by the legislation that created us. We look forward to delivering that to you, the rest of the council, and to the mayor on October 1st of this year. And I just want to also acknowledge we really look forward to the ongoing support to develop this idea of a DC Youth Climate Council. And I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to testify this morning, share our recent progress, and I look forward to any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the work, not just of you, but the whole commission. Ms. Miller, let me turn to you next.
Thank you. Good morning. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before the committee. My name is Tricia Miller. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Green Finance Authority, commonly known as DC Green Bank. I want to thank you, Chair Allen, members of the committee, and my fellow district residents for the opportunity to represent our DC Green Bank team today and discuss our performance over the last year. I'm also honored to appear alongside dedicated DC colleagues committing their careers to public service and public commitment. With the support of Mayor Bowser and the council, DC Green Bank was created to catalyze investment in community and economic development that supports a clean energy economy and job growth across the district. Over the last year, we worked with public and private stakeholders to unlock capital for a diverse array of community projects, from a solar installation that will lower utility costs by a total of $7.5 million across 1,000 homes, to green affordable housing preservation and new construction. Over the last year, for every dollar we invested, 14 additional dollars were crowded in from other sources. These investments have grown small businesses, created jobs, over 3,000 jobs, saved residents and community organizations money on their utility bills, and delivered nearly 1,000 affordable homes in communities where they're needed the most. I want to thank the council for its tremendous leadership and support of our work. Last year, the mayor and council appointed and confirmed 2 new members of our board, filling critical vacancies and ensuring that we had a full board of directors. These appointments, with Monica Warren-Jones and Anthony Washington, bring essential expertise in affordable housing finance. In addition, the Deputy Mayor of Planning and Economic Development recently appointed our newest district agency board member, Pam Fretzel-Behm, who will help guide our real estate strategy. When I last had the chance to testify before you, we had recently built out our executive leadership team, and I'm happy to report that with a year under our belt, this team has collaborated to maximize operational savings, bolster our accounting processes and budget planning, and create a very strong investment framework. We also recently added 2 new members of our investment team who will help us build partnerships and deploy even more capital across the district. This summer, we moved into DC Green Bank's first dedicated office space in the heart of downtown. Our team is looking forward to using this space as a permanent home for our staff, as well as hosting community events and supporting the vibrant DuPont Circle neighborhood. Before I discuss our most recent work, I want to update the council on DC Green Bank's community and financial impact. Since our inception, we have directly invested $71 million across the district and crowded in over $740 million in partner financing, representing a total of $800 million in capital that's put directly into local businesses, our communities, and our residents. Each of these investments represents creativity, collaboration, and economic growth, bringing the benefits of a clean energy economy to all Washingtonians. To illustrate what DC Green Bank can achieve, I want to highlight 3 projects that are representative of the value we can deliver together for district residents and businesses. First, we're supporting housing affordability and recognize this as one of the mayor and council's top priorities. Last year, we invested in the Edmondson at Berry Farm, which will deliver 139 new affordable homes as part of a redevelopment of this historic neighborhood. The new building will feature one of the largest geothermal systems in DC, which will lower energy costs and deliver clean energy to the broader community. The Edmondson will also achieve Passive House certification, one of the highest standards for energy-efficient, high-performance buildings. These healthy homes will improve indoor air quality and resident comfort while maximizing utility cost savings. DC Green Bank invested $3 million in that project, alongside financing and grants from DEMPED, DC Housing Finance Agency, and the Public Service Commission. So this was a true collaboration. The Edmondson represents part of over $20 million that DC Green Bank has funded over the last year in affordable housing, which will help create and preserve over 600 affordable homes throughout DC. Our team collaborated with DOEE to invest these funds to help affordable housing projects meet or exceed the Building Energy Performance Standard. We also worked with DHCD to invest in projects where additional capital was needed. These investments extend the reach of the Housing Production Trust Fund and mobilize critical public and private sources of capital that were otherwise on the sidelines. The next project I want to highlight demonstrates how DC Green Bank and our community partners can help families directly lower their energy costs. Financing from DC Green Bank is supporting community solar projects that will cut energy costs for more than 1,000 families across all 8 wards. Installed on previously empty rooftops in Ward 5, the 6.1 megawatt solar system will save DC families $7.5 million in utility costs. This project is our largest solar installation to date and the second largest community solar project in the district. And it's an incredible return on investment. For our $2.6 million invested, we were able to crowd in an additional $17.4 million in private capital. By maximizing local investments in clean energy, we can continue to help strengthen DC's economy, create jobs, and lower energy costs for DC families. Last is the Community Impact Initiative, which is really a hallmark of our programs that support community-serving institutions and emerging small businesses. Last year, the Howard Theater had an aging heating and cooling system that was beginning to fail, and the theater needed help financing it to replace it. DC Green Bank stepped in with the needed $775,000 in capital to help install a new HVAC system and also add rooftop solar. Together, these systems will save the Howard Theater an estimated $1.5 million in utility costs. This project is a testament to the tenacity and creativity of our team to help preserve a cultural and historic landmark. Next, I want to highlight our role as the DC PACE Program Administrator. Local economic development and capital mobilization will be crucial to supporting the mayor and council's shared goal to make downtown DC stronger and more vibrant. The DC PACE program provides a reliable financing solution to invest in clean energy and efficiency improvements for buildings across DC, including projects in line with the Mayor's Office to Anything program. Since I last appeared before the committee, the DC PACE program has supported over $25 million in new financing. One of these projects is an office to hotel conversion in the heart of DuPont Circle. To date, the DC PACE program has generated over $130 million in local investment and supported 1,500 jobs. Through these programs, we continue to deliver affordable housing, support and expand jobs and workforce opportunities, and generate direct energy and cost savings to our communities. As we look ahead, we're excited about the future partnership opportunities and how we can expand our impact and reach. Alongside DOEE, we established a revolving loan fund to support energy efficiency and affordable housing. With DOEE as the lead agency, these funds will help deliver on the district's energy priorities and also bolster DC Green Bank's ability to preserve affordable housing and cut utility costs. We've also developed an ambitious partnership with our colleagues at the district's Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency, HCMA, and DHCD to invest up to $18 million awarded through the FEMA Storm Acts program. In short, this program will provide federal dollars to jurisdictions seeking to build more resilient communities and allow us to offer lower cost financing for eligible projects. I'm excited about the opportunity ahead to bring more direct investment to DC communities and businesses, including by leveraging federal and local resources. DC Greenbank's focus remains to accelerate economic growth across the district, help preserve and maintain affordable housing, and catalyze the growth of small businesses. As the mayor and council work to revitalize downtown, make DC a destination for sports and entertainment, and build an economy for the future of DC, our investments can help facilitate private capital and fulfill the district's climate and energy goals. Local leadership and capital are more vital than ever. With that in mind, each year the council asks us to what we need to be successful, and I wanted to outline a few priorities. Predictable funding allows DC Greenbank to plan strategically, align our investments with the district's economic development and housing goals, and be reliable partners for district agencies, local businesses, and communities. Furthermore, sustained local capital ensures that the organization's resilience against the fluctuations in federal funding opportunities and market dynamics, safeguarding our ability to continue to invest in our communities year after year. Additionally, local support through the Sustainable Energy Trust Fund and other sources enables DC Greenbank to effectively leverage private capital. By providing local, durable sources of funding, DC Greenbank can attract additional investment, building on our 14-to-1 leverage ratio. This leveraging effect is critical to help maintain thousands of local jobs and maximize our impact in communities that have all too often been left behind. Our work also relies on a network of DC agencies and partner organizations, including DOEE and DCSEU. Each of these organizations complements one another by providing technical assistance, incentives, and financing that can help us scale our impact together. Continued funding to these entities is also essential for the continued growth of the clean energy economy in DC. In conclusion, DC Greenbank is proud of the outcomes we've achieved in fiscal years 24 and 25, and we stand ready to build on this success. We're excited to work with you to advance the district's sustainability goals and foster economic growth. As I've outlined today, our team has directly invested $71 million and has leveraged public and private capital representing $740 million to deliver affordable housing, create jobs, build small businesses, and support families in each ward of the DC. Together, we can shape a more prosperous DC. Thank you for your leadership and for the opportunity to address you this morning. We look forward to continuing to work collaboratively with the DC Council and with the Bowser administration to implement a shared vision of inclusive prosperity.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you both. Let me try to dig in on a few questions. Mr. Brandeis, I'm going to start with you. One of my bigger concerns is that when we talk about can we achieve our goals? When we have really big opportunities in front of us, sometimes feels like the district takes a pass. And I am reminded of a conversation a couple of years ago when we were starting to talk about our downtown revitalization. And we were actually in this room, different hearing though, different people, but it was a former deputy mayor for economic development. We were talking about our downtown plan, and I asked, how are we planning for a downtown revitalization that also is about sustainability, resiliency, energy use? And the response I got back was, he said, we need to decide if that's a priority or not. I was really disappointed in that answer. We're just coming on the heels of a $500 million public investment in Cap One Arena, an investment I support because it will help us with our downtown revitalization. It is crucial to keep that arena that creates almost year-round activity happening there. But it's played out a little bit in the press as well. We apparently, now that the district's going to own it, the Green Buildings Act applies, but immediately there was a request for an exemption from all those requirements, and really no plan of how to even meet them. In a hearing yesterday, we had a conversation with the current deputy mayor for economic development, who I hold in great regard and have worked with for a very long time. But we were talking about the future of RFK. And we all know The mayor's made, no secret that she is working quickly to try to put together a proposal to put in front of the city for a new stadium. And regardless of how you feel about a stadium, one question that gets asked, though, it's a fair question, is what type of either net zero or energy or resiliency requirements are we putting on whatever that proposal would look like? And the response I got yesterday was, we haven't really even started any conversation about that. It's way too early to think about that. I don't think it's too early to think about that. If that's a goal, if it's a priority, it should be part of the front end of the conversation. So when you ask, rightly, kind of you open with, are we going to meet our goals? Feels like we have some really big opportunities, some potentially really big investments, and we're not prioritizing this. So I don't see how we're going to meet our goals. I'm concerned about that. And I know when we think about strategically, the time horizon, the event horizon on achieving these goals takes decades to get there. We're not prioritizing this now. I don't see it. So I wanted to ask you, is from the commission's perspective, are y'all having any conversations, for example, around when the district is leading a marquee effort, a signature type of project? How are we making sure that the commitment that this is part of the conversation? It's not a nice to have, it's not a tack on, it's not kind of, wouldn't it be nice? This is a fundamental part. Are you having any conversations about how the district can be stronger in making sure that these aren't things we just kind of pat ourselves on the back if we can add on a little element here and celebrate it, but it is baked in to the way in which we do this work?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. There is nothing more climate positive than for us to revitalize our downtown and encourage more people to live in the District of Columbia. We have a city that people like to live in, and we are in the heart of a growing region. Every person, as our region continues to grow, every person that decides to live out in Loudoun County versus in the District of Columbia is working against our collective objective. And so I appreciate the question, but we really do need to prioritize the very fundamentals of transit-oriented development in the District of Columbia. And with that comes all of the density issues and kind of basic land use planning that I think collectively as a city, we're doing a great job at right now. And the prioritization of revitalizing the downtown is, I mean, the buy-in is wonderful. It's across the board. So that's kind of point number one. Point number two, I don't think we're going to be able to transact our way to our goals. In other words, we need a much bigger, broader deployment of capital in a kind of a market transformation paradigm. And I believe that's what we're in the middle of. This is not just kind of a set of environmental goals. This is a foundational market transformation of the District of Columbia. It's taking decades, right? But this is really important. And then third, I think all of these decisions, and they're always tough decisions, and they're market-based finance decisions, have to be supported by a greater and more robust amount of data around how we are actually getting to where we need to go. And that is not only the important metrics associated with carbon emissions and even emerging metrics associated with resiliency, but it has to include an integrated reporting regime, if you will, that includes economics. We've got a lot more work to do in this area. And I'm not going to comment on any one transaction, right? But, we have to inform all of these decisions in a manner that allows us to collectively continue to make progress. And I think we're running a marathon here, that's maybe an understatement. And so we may not always get it right, and we may not have the ability to marshal the capital to get it to achieve certain demonstration, outcomes on given projects. But we've got to keep our eye on the ball of where we are, the kind of North Star, right? Of where are we going here, and how are our activities and actions supporting our journey?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. And I think your marathon example is a good one because it is a marathon. But I also know I can't just wake up in the morning and go run one. So to me, I've got to make sure that the planning is baked in. It's part of what we do. And there will be individual discrete decisions along the way that people may wish we'd gone a little bit more one way or the other. But the part that troubled me yesterday was an answer that said, no, we haven't started work on that. It's really not, this isn't the time to really talk about that yet. Because I think it is the time to talk about it. Granted, we may not all agree on every decision that gets made. It needs to be part of the conversation.
I just want to again underscore how interconnected our activities in the district are to the region. And of course, I know you're very active with the Council of Governments. But we need to kind of take great pride in continuing to leverage the existing infrastructure that we have in the district. And if you look at the alternatives, and just let's use the arena as an example, right? Had the arena moved out, of the district, that wouldn't have affected our goals at all. But it would have been a horrendous outcome in terms of the production of greenhouse gases. And this gets into lots of technical issues associated with embodied carbon, scope 3 emissions. How are we really kind of managing this? And that we have a greater kind of need to be coordinating across the region on these issues. And there's some good emerging work being done on this associated with building materials and embodied carbon and so forth. That data we're not even really collecting or reporting on right now. COG, I know, is doing some great work there, but we have to also look at our goals. We have to look at our goals and understand, have we set the correct goals?
Right. Yeah. Well, and that gets to another question I was going to ask you is in your pre-hearing responses, when we asked you, can I identify some of the challenges you see? One of them that you identified was weak reporting requirements, quote, weak reporting requirements for DC agencies in our enabling legislation, end quote. Could you elaborate a little bit more on what you'd like to have more access to? Which agencies either are or aren't sharing it in a way that we need? And if we need to make legislative changes, I'm up for that. But do we also struggle with a lack of kind of an enforcement mechanism so that I can put on a piece of paper that these reports are supposed to be made, but if they don't happen, how do I enforce that? How do I make sure it works? So we'd love to expand a bit on that.
Yeah, well, as you know, the commission is not a regulatory body. We have no regulatory power whatsoever. And so we are an information aggregator, if you will, and a feedback loop back to you and to the mayor. And in addition to the kind of volunteer nature of our commission and the commissioners, we extend invitations to all kinds of stakeholders, both in and outside of the government, to come to us to share their progress and to report. One of the things that we really need to do more work on, and this is of course an extremely dynamic conversation in our city right now, is to better understand where the federal government is going with respect to its assets. This has a material impact on all of us and on this issue. And then, there are a whole host of agencies that are doing incredible work. And we've heard from individual, project leads within those agencies doing amazing, innovative work. As I said before, is really kind of nationally trend-setting, in some cases internationally trend-setting. But we don't have a kind of like that formal reporting mechanism for us to kind of like be able to receive data from agencies and understand and be able to decipher how that data kind of aligns with our goals. So that's what that comment was referring to.
Well, certainly be more than happy to kind of continue that work as we identify what would more or better reporting look like. Because the feedback loop only works if you're getting what you need to provide the feedback, right?
Yeah.
And so making sure we do that. And completely agree. The sheer amount of uncertainty that has been entered into, not just this conversation, but everyone right now on the federal side is deeply unsettling and creates a lack of clarity about where things are headed. So it's, yeah, that's, you're certainly on point there. One of the things when we also looked at from a budget perspective, in the FY25 budget, we had provided $50,000 in funds, largely to assist with the production of the third report coming. You also mentioned things like the phenomenal knowledge forum that was created. I'm sure that's got some costs that are associated with that too. Are there any other planned expenditures for the funding for the remainder of the fiscal year besides focus on the report?
That we've allocated that to the report, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So the answer to your question is no.
Got it. And congratulations again on such a successful event that you held at MLK. Is that something that you want to be able to replicate more frequently? Is that something that you're on the right pace of how often you'd want to replicate that? What do you, what did you learn from that event that you want to take?
A couple of observations. So there was the second time we've done that. We've done that in tandem with the production of our reports.
Mm-hmm.
So we did one 3 years ago. We did one, just this last month. I do see across the country some leading cities doing like very interesting annual convenings intended to actually spur economic development activities in the climate and energy space. So that's something I'm quite interested in. To do that right, really needs to be thought through. But it could be a phenomenal opportunity. We're doing so much already. I think an event like that would really help kind of engage our partners and many stakeholders outside of the city that we're also dependent upon, including investors that we want to attract to the city. So yes, that's something we should explore. I want to just note one kind of like emerging theme that we're really hearing, and that is that, of course, we've got such excellent momentum on citywide initiatives. But we're hearing, we had neighborhood representatives and ANC members from across the city at our forum. People really want to know, what can I do in my community? Mm-hmm. And so this is an interesting question with respect to the articulation of strategy. And that is, I don't think just only citywide initiatives are going to work, nor, by the way, do I think only individual demonstration projects are going to work either, right? So I think people in the city need to understand, what are the climate mitigation strategies in my neighborhood? Mm-hmm. What are the resilience initiatives and opportunities in my neighborhood? And we, of course, have this phenomenal, wonderful example of the Ward 7 Resilience Center that's forming with really positive engagement and excitement, really, really very, very innovative. And so you can imagine like more neighborhood ward-based, but then also neighborhood-based articulations of strategy.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And we heard some great testimony about the Ward 7 Resilience Hub last week. Mm-hmm. And, the saying goes, of course, all things go local. And I think it's, especially in this space, it's one that helps people really understand, because sometimes these efforts can feel very much a little too big to take a bite out of. Yeah. I remember I introduced some legislation to work on how to create some resiliency with shade on playgrounds, for example. And I was struck by how many people resonated with that and then also talked about it in their backyard playground, right? Their playground in their neighborhood, and about how this was our community space. We need to have this because it creates, more shade structures that allows us to use these spaces to gather as community, to become these hubs. And that was just creating some shade, yeah. Right? So everything that happens that brings it back local, I think, is one of those ways that we really help connect with people about what
I'd like to give just one more example from your ward, and that is the Mount Vernon Triangle Community Improvement District,
Mhm.
they are creating a local circular economy initiative
Mhm.
that at face value isn't about climate at all. It's about supporting local businesses. It's about engaging residents in their community. But these kinds of initiatives are incredibly important to reducing transportation associated emissions, to building sustainable communities and businesses. And so I think this idea of more localized circular economy initiatives is something that all of our neighborhoods across the city could learn from in the Mount Vernon Triangle.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's another great project and effort to help highlight. Also makes a really good segue as I'm gonna turn to Ms. Miller and draw her in a little bit. One of the things that struck me a little bit, as you prepare for a hearing, staff helps me put together an opening statement. And traditionally what we do is we just pull mission statements for each agency. So as I read through them, and I was struck by when you shared your testimony, sometimes it felt like the words weren't actually lining up. And this is not a negative. This is about what more you're doing. For example, the phenomenal successful projects that you highlighted: housing affordability, lowering energy costs, supporting community serving institutions and emerging small businesses. None of that's actually in the mission statement on the Green Bank, but it's such a critical part of what you do and what you've had huge success with. I also think that when we talk about these efforts, and we certainly ran into this last year when we had to help fight to restore some critical funding that allows us to deliver on these, is that when we're doing it right, the work that's taking place is lowering costs to help people be able to call this place home. We are lowering energy costs to help affordability in the district. We are creating jobs. We are supporting small businesses and emerging businesses. I know it's something you believe in and the Green Bank believes in and delivers on. How much do you think we should be starting to reframe the way we even define what the Green Bank is to make sure those elements are frankly a little more upfront, to really recognize why it matters, kind of bringing it back to like make it local, right? Help people understand rather than kind of these big concepts that, the saying of, it's hard to eat an elephant, one bite at a time. How do we make sure that it's something that people can wrap their heads around?
Thank you for that question, and also for your support last year, as you mentioned that the council was critical in restoring funding for the DC Green Bank to invest in some of those projects I highlighted today. So we're just tremendously grateful to have that support from both the mayor and the council to try and even get close to meeting the demand for capital that we see that's out there in the market. To get back to your question and reconciling the mission and some of the outcomes or impact metrics that I shared today, I actually think they are interwoven. And part of that comes back to inclusive prosperity, which was how the Green Bank was established. That was unique. There were many green banks across the country that preceded DC Green Bank. But one of the key unique features of DC Green Bank's origin story is that we were started with inclusive prosperity as the core of the mission. Now, what does that mean? And I think that's getting to your point of, how do we shift in terms of the narrative and the outcomes? And when we think of inclusive prosperity, we want to reach underserved communities. We want to make sure our capital is aligned in supporting the community serving institutions and the residents that otherwise are going to remain on the sidelines when it comes to commercial banking and finance for green projects. So that's, to me, how I connect the dots, is looking at what enables us to go out there and build programs like the Community Impact Initiative. Is very much in line with our goals of sustainability and climate mitigation. However, it's got to be grounded in an economic development and housing strategy that's going to do more than just lower GHG emissions. And that's what you heard about today with a number of our projects, where we are tracking in every development or in our role as the PACE administrator, what are those job numbers? What are those housing targets? And how can we do, the most with the limited resources that we have access to both capitalize and bring in private sector and other public sources, and ensure that inclusive prosperity leads to a better, neighborhood fabric with strengthening local jobs and providing permanent housing solutions. So they're very much part and parcel with our mission.
Absolutely. And to be perfectly clear, I'm not suggesting by any stretch that the Green Bank's off mission. I think you're on mission and doing it well. It's more of, should we look at the way in which we use that mission statement to just more explicitly include the work that's being done? Because I think it also helps translate for more people the great work that's being done. And that's my point there is, so I just definitely don't want you to think I'm saying you're off mission. You're on mission.
No,
You're
I
delivering.
appreciate it.
It's how do we help make sure we're describing it in a
Yeah.
way? And sometimes we all go back and kind of update our mission statements every now and then.
Mhm.
I'm really proud of the work that you're doing and delivering on. It's, can we think about how we say that so that the rest of our community can hear that, right? One of the things, last year I certainly bragged on you as you delivered that, what we called last year was a 9-to-1 match. So for every public dollar that I put into the Green Bank, we were leveraging back 9 private dollars. In your testimony, you said, okay, we're at 14-to-1 now. So every dollar you get 14 back, which is great. Can you help me understand from last year's 9-to-1 to this year's 14-to-1? Does that represent a new baseline and normal? Is that kind of a snapshot in time of this is right now it's 14-to-1? Do I expect it'll get back to like a 9-to-1? Or do I expect, no, this is the growth pattern. And so next year at this time, we're going to be looking at 18 to 19-to-1. Can you spend a little time talking about that number and what that means so I can help translate that also to others?
Thank you, Chair Allen. The increase from 9-to-1 leverage to 14-to-1 was due in part to our ability to provide additional capital to large infrastructure, green building, green affordable housing projects. So the total capital stack was much larger when we deployed with the support of DOEE, the BEPS loan facility. Those were mission critical projects that had stretched as far as they could other resources from LIHTC and from the Housing Production Trust Fund. So we could come in with a smaller slice to help boost the outcomes tied to the green investments in those facilities and also bring those projects over the finish line. It also results in a larger leverage because we're pulling in, many different sources in these large projects like Berry Farm. To look ahead, I think you'll see a mix. We want to continue to have a diversified portfolio so that we're supporting some of the smaller community investments like you saw with Aisha Hudson at APs to bring emerging developers from the community into the fold in terms of construction and building management and creating more opportunities for homegrown solutions in underserved neighborhoods. And those projects, we may play a larger role in the capital stack versus one of the recent ones that we were at together, the Emblem, where it took many hands and many different public and private sources to do multi-million-dollar investment. So I think you'll see a range, but we'll continue to grow on it. And then I think one of the really exciting aspects of our work in year 5 is that, we've been able to bring in over 70 million in direct investment in a fairly short amount of time with a small but critical investment from DC to try and grow that. So it's more we can pull in for our direct investment, the more opportunities we have to grow that leverage ratio and provide more capital solutions.
Got it. Okay. So part of what I'm trying to make sure that I can do is we should think of this 9-to-1 or 14-to-1 as a range that at any specific time is going to be a little bit variable based on which projects and which and size and scope of a capital stack you're engaged in. What I'm trying to anticipate, if you're 14-to-1, next year we're at 11-to-1. I don't want people to see that as you're being less efficient or doing different, right? So I want to make sure that we can describe that as there is a range that we could reasonably expect. That ratio is going to move around a little bit. All of it's phenomenal. But I want to make sure that we're able to think about it in a way that if someone sees a 14-to-1 go to a 11-to-1, that's not a decrease. That's just simply reflection of the types and scopes of projects. Now, if you got down to a 1-to-1, then we got a problem. But I don't think you're going to get there. But am I describing that accurately?
Absolutely. And I think that's the opportunity, is to look at it across the continuum,
Mhm.
because as we keep growing that cumulative direct investment number, we're also growing that cumulative leverage ratio number. So it's being able to see the whole picture of how much we can deliver on an annual basis and on a total impact for DC communities. And likewise, how much capital mobilization can we support crowding in to ensure that our projects have the maximum direct economic benefits to the district in all wards. So we'll continue to propel the leverage and grow the capital stack in every project that we do, and be tracking the cumulative impact as well as on an annual basis. And when we are able to get creative, as we did last year, where we were facing some significant budget constraints, we looked to pull in as many other sources as we could. And so that's also part of, I think, the charge and the opportunity, is to look at ways we can do more with participations from other institutional partners and players. So, we won't get down to one-to-one, don't worry.
All right. Better not. All right. Next question I was going to ask, in government, we love acronyms. So buckle up for a second. All right. In your pre-hearing responses, you mentioned several new loan programs that the Green Bank launched in FY24 and 25. I'm going to start with the Energy Efficiency Revolving Loan Fund. ERLF, I don't know if I'm going to even use the acronym, Energy Efficient Revolving Loan Fund. My understanding is that the Inflation Investment and Jobs Act, IIJA, included grant funding for the U.S. Department of Energy's State Energy Program, some of which was awarded DOEE. DOEE in turn then provided $4.4 million subaward to the Green Finance Authority to establish this Energy Efficiency Revolving Loan Fund. Can you say a little bit more about how is that different than your other products? Like, sometimes for the layperson, these products are kind of hard to understand and distinguish between them. How is that different than some of the other products you have?
Thank you for that question, Chair Allen. The opportunity that the Energy Efficiency Revolving Loan Fund provides.
Is there a good acronym for that? What do we say?
ERLF. We can start using it.
Let's go use ERLF.
Works.
Right, ERLF.
So under ERLF, DOEE was able to successfully receive an award from Department of Energy and provide us with that 4.4 million to do to serve existing affordable housing buildings. So it's a subset of our lending in affordable housing, that these restricted funds help accelerate energy efficiency improvements in affordable housing projects that meet certain qualifications of that program. And the key attributes are that they're in the DHCD portfolio, so they're existing affordable housing projects with covenants that will preserve their permanent affordability. And then we can leverage that 4.4 million to help fund some of the energy efficiency and building performance improvements that otherwise wouldn't be financeable.
Got it. Do you see that then, or is it a vehicle through which some of the BEPS-related financing can be issued? Or is it distinct from our BEPS-related improvements to the Green Bank?
It could certainly support the BEPS policy, and because we're focused on existing multifamily affordable housing, that, those projects that are looking to do some existing retrofits. And so, to the extent, 4.4 million is terrific. It's not going to serve it won't even get close to the demand for rehab improvements and multifamily affordable housing in the district. But it will allow us to support probably 2 to 3 projects in that portfolio that then could ensure that we are helping those owners not only realize energy and cost savings over the course of the construction phase, but meet compliance with BEPS in the future.
Good. To me, this is a space where we got to keep working on finding ways to help support these types of projects. And I know we also have a good number. I've got several of them just in my ward of much older but large residential buildings that the costs of those system upgrades are just, they're too much for, a condo association to figure out how to do. And I think tools like this can help us figure out how we help them bridge that gap, be able to make those modernizations and efficiencies, and also manage just the real life costs that they got to figure out how to do. So I look forward to continuing to see that work grow and how we can support that. In December, the Green Bank's board approved 2 other loan programs. So I want to make sure I understand each of these. So the first is a 19.75 million solar for all loan facility implemented in coordination with DOEE. Can you say a little more of the scope of that project? I think, well, no, I'll just ask you that. Can you say a little more about that project?
Sure. So this is under the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, the Solar for All program, which was awarded to about 60 different jurisdictions across the country. And we were thrilled to be part of the district's application and a coalition partner to DOEE for Solar for All. The award for Solar for All for the district was roughly $62 million, of which we are a subrecipient. So we'll utilize that 19.75 million to stand up a Solar for All loan facility that can help deliver capital to projects that meet the Solar for All requirements, which are 100% serving low-income and disadvantaged communities, and can support deployment of solar battery storage, and then also some of the enabling upgrades, which we know have historically stood in the way of some projects being able to get the benefits of rooftop solar. We can also support community solar facilities through that fund. But we're in the early stages. It will, we're working hand in glove with DOEE to understand the timing and when we'll be able to capitalize that fund to really get going.
Got it. Okay, thanks. And so we also have the $18 million National Clean Investment Fund facility. So this is, again, Green Bank is a subgrantee and borrower under a grant agreement between the Coalition for Green Capital and the EPA. Can you share a little more about that?
Sure. So also under the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, NCIF was the direct lending program established by the EPA as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. We are a named subawardee of the Coalition for Green Capital, national nonprofit that's one of the awardees under that program. So the board provided me with the authority to move forward with a loan program that would follow the contours of the terms and conditions in the subaward agreement that we've established with Coalition for Green Capital. Similar to Solar for All, we are in the planning stages. We are awaiting more guidance and understanding when and how those funds will be available so that we can continue to deliver in our binding agreements that we've established with the grantee organization, CGC.
Got it. Okay, thanks. We talked a little bit about federal funding and the uncertainty right now. Has there been any pause or freeze in the Green Bank's activities as a result of the federal, I will just call it a freeze for the moment. I have other words I could use to describe it, but any pauses or freeze or impacts on the Green Bank's activities right now?
Appreciate that question, and it ties directly back to the last 2 programs we were discussing. So we are committed to being good stewards of the public capital that we have access to under our approved grant agreements and partnership with DOE on Solar for All. The impact that we've faced has been just on the timing and some uncertainty around access to capital and timing to deploy those established programs and stay within our lane as subrecipients or subgrantees. So we're learning more every week and working alongside our partners to understand kind of how and when those funds will be accessible and what, if any, programmatic changes might occur so we can stay nimble and, again, be responsible stewards of public capital, especially those newer opportunities that flowed through the Inflation Reduction Act.
So the funds are not currently available.
Some of the funds are available. Others we are waiting for fund transfers through our agency partners.
Okay, all right. And also to my friends at DOEE, this is more about the federal freeze than DOEE. So it's just this flow through impact that then comes and hits on the ground. Okay. I want to also kind of ask a question. Because the green bank's in the business of issuing loans, not grants. So that means that at some point, right, the borrowers that the banks lended to will be making payments back to the green bank. So year over year, the green bank's been recapitalized with budget appropriations and transfers from the SETF. But at some point, it's going to start collecting more and more revenues from its borrowers. Absent a significant number of defaults, the green bank will grow. This is not the right terminology, but almost I kind of think of it almost as an endowment, but is there's sustainable or predictable revenue funding as a source to then complement the capitalization the district puts in. I think we're pretty far away off from getting to a space like this, but is there a point at which the green bank envisions no longer needing capitalization from the district or SETF because the revenue coming back from loans starts to create a self-sustaining model?
Yes, we are looking at the model and also the timing, thanks to the council and the mayor's support of our programs and the SETF commitment running now through FY 28. That gives us time to look at the amount, both the amount of funds that we would need to have invested in projects at any given time in order to hit that financial self-sustainable model. So we haven't had enough initial capitalization to get to the point that you raised around having the recyclability to support our overall operating costs and ensure there is enough to put into new projects. But our target is for achieving that financial sustainability model by FY 28, which will again involve predictable, durable sources of funding from now through then, as well as the ability to crowd in other sources of capital so that we can have enough deployed every year and not be on stop-start mode, which then impacts the amount of new dollars we can put out and the revenue that we receive.
Got it. Okay.
But that is the goal, and we've looked at other green banks that have, taken over a decade to get there. We hope to do it more rapidly. And even when we achieve that target, we'll also be looking for ways, like we've done with the bipartisan infrastructure law, with the BEPS loan facility with DOEE, to continue to grow new programs, because that's also a continuing need. We see right now 90 million in demand for eligible projects across all wards of DC. And with 11 million that we were able to put out last year, that doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of the need for that capital deployment. So it's a both and.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. And to be very clear, we are not near that point of capitalization, which is looking with our crystal ball out into the future. Okay. And then last couple of questions. Most of the applications the Green Bank receives seem to be through the open solicitation. So if I've done my math right, 67 in FY 24 and FY 25 to date, compared to only 10 BEPS applications and 5 applications to the Community Impact Initiative. Is there something about the open solicitations that makes it more popular, or people are being more responsive to it? Kind of what lessons have we learned just by seeing the difference in the response rate so far?
Sure. So under the open solicitation category, that really captures our general lending. So it's a broad umbrella for projects that could range from green infrastructure to community solar. So we see the most general applications come through on any given year than for restricted funds that are tied to specific project types. It's not surprising that our general bucket is often more robust. And that also helps us see where the market trends are and where the demand is for capital across a range of qualified projects. We, again, as we establish newer programs with restricted funding for particular project types, will continue to build out those different categories and related applications. But for BEPS, I think the opportunity was we had a short window of time to deploy funds for qualified multifamily affordable housing developments, and we were able to quickly fill all of the fully commit our 20 million, and then we had to and that facility. So if we'd kept it open longer, we would likely see more applications come through, but it's, it was based on the parameters of the dollars we had to deploy and the time frame to deploy those dollars versus the open solicitation, which will remain open year over year.
Right. And is intentionally broader.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. And then last question, just bringing it close to home with the office. Congratulations on the move into permanent office space as of, I think, last August. Have you found that by having a permanent base of operations in the new office, has that helped improve any agency operations, communication, collaboration? Just anything about being able to kind of have that new space that is helping advance the work of you and your team?
Yes, we've really enjoyed being together in a permanent home where we can host community events, our board meetings, and have more before we were at WeWork. So moving from a temporary to a permanent home for the team has been very grounding and a chance to do more open collaboration and bring the creativity and time in person together in the heart of downtown.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's renting co-working spaces is a great model for some spaces and maybe even for the startup, but being able to have a permanent office and home base, I think has a lot of benefits. And it's part of the maturation of this entity and its process and growth too. So I appreciate it. I don't have any further questions for either of you. I want to just say I appreciate the work that each of you do as leaders in our city. I know you're supported by colleagues and team members as well that make all that work happen. So please extend my thanks to them as well, and appreciate the conversation today, the work that'll come up in the year ahead, and really excited about the work that we've got in front of us. So thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. What we're going to do now then is transition to our next panel of government witnesses. Hopefully you saw we tried to pair these things up so we didn't just have 4 people across at the same time. But I've got Benjamin Burdick, who's the interim managing director of the DC Sustainable Energy Utility, and Richard Jackson, the director of the Department of Energy and Environment. Good morning to you both. Let me swear both of you in real fast, and then I'll turn to Mr. Burdick for your testimony, and then Mr. Jackson. Sure, I mean, let's have everybody swear in. I love that. All right, Director Jackson says all his deputies have to get sworn in too, so everyone on my left is just going to put their hand up. All right, if you please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm on a penalty of perjury the testimony you have to give to the Committee on Transportation and the Environment is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you all very much. I'm not going to call out if I didn't see it yet. Go. All right, Mr. Burdick, let me turn to you first, and then Director Jackson, I'll turn to you right after that.
Thank you very much, Chair Allen. Good morning, Chair Allen, members of the Committee on Transportation and the Environment. My name is Benjamin Burdick. I am currently serving as the interim managing director of the District of Columbia Sustainable Energy Utility, or DCSEU. I'm a district resident of nearly 20 years and currently a resident of Ward 5. As background, I want to start by sharing that the DCSEU is charged with implementing clean energy programs here in the district with a focus on reducing energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions for residents and businesses, increasing renewable energy generating capacity, investing in low and moderate income communities with our programs and projects, growing the numbers of green collar jobs for DC residents, and supporting district businesses in the emerging green technology industry. We were created by the Clean and Affordable Energy Act of 2008, and we've been working in the district since 2011, and actually next month we'll celebrate our 14th year here. So excited by that. So during that time, we've been operated by VEIC, which is a national nonprofit and national leader with nearly 40 years of experience in these clean energy programs and sustainable energy utilities. The EIC operates the DCSU under performance contract with the District Department of Energy and Environment, receives input and recommendations and guidance from the SU Advisory Board, is subject to oversight, obviously, from DC Council. And for the past 13 years, we've assisted residents and businesses through the delivery of financial incentives, technical assistance, educational initiatives to help deliver more than $2 billion in lifetime cost savings for the district, for residents and businesses and other organizations. All this has been done by responsibly deploying about $180 million in rebates and incentives since 2011, which we believe makes the DCSU a tremendous return on investment for the district. In my testimony today, I'll report on the progress and accomplishments of the DCSEU achieved through our programs and services last year, address some of the challenges we faced this past year, and discuss some of the future paths of our programs and services. We look forward to collaborating with all stakeholders to continue to advance the district towards achieving its leading clean energy and climate goals. As council is aware, like many district programs and agencies, we were faced with some budget reductions in FY24, a total of $14.5 million reduced from Solar for All, our Affordable Housing Retrofit Accelerator, and the Affordable Home Electrification Program, which are all obviously programs that seek to serve low and moderate income residents and owners of affordable housing so they can make energy efficiency and clean energy upgrades. One example, the Solar for All program provides access to solar at no cost, creating long-term energy bill savings for low-income residents, while also employing local residents and providing opportunities for local contractors, especially certified business enterprises, to work to provide this work and do this work here in the district. We've also helped, the Solar for All programs also helped to launch local businesses, contribute to district's economic growth. Since 2019, the DCSU's work on Solar for All has resulted in developing enough solar to serve 11,000 income qualified households that will see about $80+ million in lifetime bill reductions over 15 to 20 years. I want to say that we really appreciate the support of the DOEE, the advisory board, DC Council, and the mayor, ensuring the ongoing commitment to these programs. DOE was really instrumental in ensuring we could continue to serve our existing customers last year, honor our program commitments last year in the face of some of those cuts. And we were incredibly grateful for the district and the council to be able to restore some of those funds in June, which allowed us to work with our contractors and serve more of our customers and make a bigger impact. We remained flexible during that time, just taking a really three-pronged approach, transitioning some of our projects that were in those programs that were impacted to other alternative DCSU programs where possible. When the funds were returned, serving those additional customers under those programs under a shortened time frame. And then determining where customers we could not serve in FY24, making sure that we put them in the queue and are able to serve them this year. Ultimately, we were able to move forward and close 61 affordable home electrification program projects serving 81 families, serve 17 properties through the Affordable Housing Retrofit Accelerator program, and complete 58 single-family Solar for All installations. While this was less than originally planned, it still represents a meaningful impact here in the district. In addition to these challenges, we also had some really exciting opportunities to partner with DOEE to amplify the impact or to prepare to amplify the impact of clean energy programs for residents and businesses. This included, under DOE's leadership, supporting as a partner the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund application for the Solar for All competition. In April, it was announced that DC would receive $62.5 million to accelerate solar energy here in the district. A portion of that to come to the DCSU to expand its existing Solar for All offerings. Since 2019, the SEU has installed solar on more than 650 rooftops here in the district on single-family homes, and then supported the development of more than 230 community solar installations across the district. Excuse me. The DCSU also worked closely with DOE in support of applications for Inflation Reduction Act funds, the home energy rebate programs. A portion of these funds are designated to flow through the Affordable Home Electrification Program and the Affordable Housing Retrofit Accelerator Program to expand and deepen their impact as well through clean energy upgrades for property owners, residents, green jobs for DC residents, and helping to preserve affordable housing across the district. Excuse me. In FY24, which is the third of a 5-year option period for the DCSU contract, we continue to advance our energy efficiency and clean energy initiatives. As a result of our organization's work in FY24 alone, DC residents and businesses will experience lasting impacts with over $330 million in lifetime cost savings, prevention of more than 1 million metric tons of lifetime CO2 emissions, equivalent emissions. And a couple highlights from last year that I want to share, just creating more than 90 green jobs, more FTEs for DC residents, all at least district living wage, which exceeds our annual maximum benchmark, our performance benchmark. More than $18 million, about 62% of our total FY24 spending went back to residents, businesses, or contractors in the form of rebates and incentives. Investing more than $8.7 million with certified business enterprises, which puts money directly into the local economy. and, you know, supports these CBEs in their growth. And we've seen a lot of our CBEs grow over the years, which is great. And then investing more than $5.9 million in low and moderate income communities with our core SETF funds, nearly achieving our maximum benchmark of 30% of our dollars going to these communities. Notably, that does not include our affordable home electrification program, our retrofit accelerator, solar for all program in addition there. More than 900 families provided access to the benefits of solar at no cost through the Solar for All program, which will cut each household's utility bills by $500 or more each year. And then 41 DC residents graduated from our workforce development program last year, 93% of them going on to full-time employment after graduation. A program that we would love to have you and other members of the committee come speak to at any point if you'd like. Our additional written testimony goes into a lot more detail about our overall FY24 performance and results. I'm happy to go into more details about those, but for the interest of time, I just want to say in closing, you know, while all of us working in clean energy and sustainability industries are facing some significant uncertainty and challenges, we're really proud of the results we achieved in 24. Remain really optimistic about the future. We're optimistic because the district continues to be a leader in this space, setting bold policies and aggressive goals, designing groundbreaking programs like Solar for All to achieve these goals, and continuing to invest in a clean energy future. We're optimistic because these programs continue to deliver long-term environmental, health, and economic benefits to the district. They create jobs for DC residents, economic growth for local contractors and businesses, and they bring energy bill savings to those who need it most, which allows them to free up dollars to invest in their critical needs. And just want to say we're very honored to be able to do this work, honored to work with DOE as our client here, and look forward to continuing to partner to develop innovative approaches to help the district achieve its long-term goals. I want to say thank you to the committee for allowing us to testify today, and I look forward to any questions the committee may have.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And Director Jackson, good morning. Let me turn to you.
Morning. Yeah, before I get started, I want to just first off start by saying, you know, on behalf of DOE team, thank you for the public hearing with the public witnesses last Friday. The team appreciated their own remarks. Also appreciated the opportunities for continuous improvement that we heard. And it was just a welcome time to be focused purely in on the resident stakeholders and businesses and what they had to say in terms of evaluating DOE. So just want to say thank you for the opportunity and thank you to them for doing that testimony. So with that, I'll start mine. So good evening, Chairman, Chairperson Allen, and members of the Committee of Transportation and Environment. I'm Richard Jackson, Director of the Department of Energy and Environment. I'm pleased to appear before you, the committee today, to provide testimony on behalf of Mayor Muriel Bowser on the department's activities and accomplishments in fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 25 to date. Mayor Bowser's fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 budgets reflected our deep commitment to DC values by making investments that will provide all residents of the District of Columbia with a fair shot to succeed. We remain focused each day on creating pathways to the middle class by investing in education, affordable housing, infrastructure, public safety, and people. We continue to work in the face of a challenging fiscal outlook. Therefore, it is an absolute must for us to focus on core agency functions and responsibilities and spend our dollars wisely and effectively. The Department of Energy and Environment is comprised of more than 450 dedicated engineers, scientists, inspectors, environmental protection specialists, analysts, administrators, public outreach specialists, and support staff who are working to protect and restore the environment, conserve natural resources, mitigate pollution, promote resiliency, increase access to clean and renewable energy, and secure a sustainable future. Throughout fiscal year 2024 and early FY25, DOE has advanced Mayor Bowser's vision to make the District of Columbia the greenest, healthiest, most livable city for all district residents. As we green our city, we are building the green economy for DC in countless ways, large and small. Just a few examples. Through our small and accessible sustainability program in FY24, DOE awarded 8 urban farms approximately $70,000 to increase infrastructure and operations at district farms. We also awarded 8 nonprofit and businesses just over $62,000 to increase waste diversion through donation, reuse, and repair. On a larger scale, in FY 25, DOE is launching our Pathways to Success program, short name being Pathways, a new initiative designed to increase participation of small local businesses in the district's stormwater retention credits, or SRC market. Pathways will provide capacity building support and grant funding to new SRC aggregators to develop green infrastructure projects that generate SRCs and contribute to stormwater management. In FY 24, DOE laid the groundwork for Pathways by developing program guidance and defining eligibility criteria. Program success will be measured by the number of companies engaged, green infrastructure projects designed and constructed, and overall volume of stormwater captured. While support for our local businesses is essential to building this new economy, no economic strategy would be complete without directly investing in job skills and professional advancement for district residents. Through efforts like our Green Trades DC Technical Training Program, which in 24 recruited and trained more than 150 residents to prepare for careers as journey level electricians, our Green Zone Environmental Program, GZEP, which supports the Marion Barry Summer Youth Employment Program, hired 21 interns in FY 24. The program trained approximately 200 youth who participated in virtual learning and field job training, and learned about sustainability and natural habitats in the city. Interns with exceptional leadership skills were invited to participate in the 8-week DOE Green Ready internship program, which extends job readiness and mentorship opportunities. And we also secured $1 million in federal funding to build capacity among district companies installing modern heat pumps and clean induction stoves via training delivered through the established Train Green program at the DCSEU. We continued our collaboration with International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, providing them resources to recruit a future generation of electricians that the district need to work on our buildings, install EV charging infrastructure, and upgrade our grid. Our work to improve economic opportunities for district residents goes hand in hand with the effort to reduce air pollution and make DC a healthier city for all residents. In FY 24, DOE partnered with the DC Housing Authority to invest $9.1 million of American Rescue Plan Act funding into modern, energy efficient, healthy electrification upgrades at 2 existing public housing properties, improving the comfort and health of residents in over 500 low-income households and supporting high-quality, affordable housing in the district. We also began ramping up our work to electrify affordable housing and low-income homes. This work will benefit from the $60 million investment in federal funding that DOE secured to help cover the upfront costs of new all-electric HVAC, water heating, and cooking systems to make residents' homes cleaner and more comfortable while saving them money. In FY 24, DOE, through the DCSEU, helped electrify 81 low-income homes across the district. In first quarter FY 25, we have over 60 households in the pipeline now for such work. This year, we also greatly enhanced the value of electric HVAC rebates to up to $5,000 for all district residents, now covered by other full-service programs. These initiatives put dollars back in the pocket of DC residents by rewarding them for investing in cleaner, more efficient technology for their homes. Our duty to cleanse the air we all breathe extends outside the home as well. In FY 24, DOE expanded our mobile air quality monitoring program. This mobile monitoring projects maps. This mobile monitoring program maps hyperlocal air pollution at the community block level and provides valuable insight into the differences in air quality and emissions for specific areas of the district. The initial pilot project in 23 focused on 3 primary communities in Wards 5, Ward 6, and Ward 8. In 2024, we expanded the project to include nearly half of the district, touching every ward. In FY 24, our Air Quality Division also installed the first federal reference air quality monitoring station at the Bald Eagle Recreation Center in Ward 8. This monitoring station measures fine particulate matter, commonly known as PM 2.5, at this time. DOE conducted extensive community outreach to identify and decide on a location for this monitoring station. We monitor other environmental health risks as well, including ones that are even harder to detect and that can be challenging to remediate. We know, for example, that there is no safe level of exposure to lead for our city's children. And DOE has worked tirelessly to reduce exposure to lead in the district, but we cannot do it alone. That's why in FY 24 and continuing into FY 25 and beyond, we're deepening our partnerships with the DC Department of Health. One way we do this is through better monitoring and visualization of data. Our Lead Safe and Healthy Housing Division internal childhood lead testing dashboard, which was built, brand new, which was built, allowed staff to quickly visualize and compare data on lead exposure across various district neighborhoods in real time. The dashboard highlights specific zip codes where multiple cases occur annually and pinpoints common factor among residents in those areas. This real-time data visualization has greatly improved the program's ability to detect clusters, prioritize high-risk communities, and respond more efficiently to emerging threats of lead exposure, while also educating case managers on specific exposure sources that can be predominant within an area. DOE has also greatly expanded our efforts to ensure that child care facilities across the district have access to and technical support to maintain filtration systems to prevent lead exposure through drinking water. All of this is just the start. In FY 25, DOE and DOEE and DC Health are expanding our partnership further as we start to transition our healthy housing branch to DC's Health's new Environmental Health Administration. This will enhance DC Health's capabilities and ensure that the epidemiologists and other public health professionals currently at DOE can work more effectively. DOE will retain responsibility for inspections and enforcement of our district regulations relating to lead-based paint and lead-safe work practices, issuing lead certification and abatement permits, conducting environmental investigations, and lead assessments. We'll be working with childhood facilities to ensure lead-free drinking water by implementing a robust filtering program and conducting a lead reduction program to assist eligible households with lead hazard reduction activities. Our work with health partners has grown in other ways as well. To return to air quality for a moment, I want to highlight the important work we're doing to help children with asthma. Starting in FY 23 and continuing in FY 24, DOE has been working with nonprofit community health organization, Breathe DC, to improve long-term asthma control and management among children in low-income households. Breathe DC has visited the homes of more than 40 children and helped families identify asthma catalysts and provide educational materials and asthma management supplies, including tablets for access to telemedicine services and online asthma resources. Breathe DC has trained childhood facility staff in 5 childhood facilities in Ward 7 and Ward 8 on mitigating environmental asthma triggers and providing asthma management, educational materials, and cleaning materials. We support our most vulnerable residents in other ways as well. Utility bills for essential services such as home heating, water, and electricity can be a major burden for many households. In FY 24, our utility assistance program approved more than 18,000 households for assistance from the low-income home energy assistance program alone. We continue our work to help district residents not only with emergency assistance, but also to make their homes safer and more resilient for the future. In FY 24, our weatherization assistance program aided 100 households through energy audits and installation of audit recommended energy efficiency measures and water conservation measures to help families maintain energy efficient, safe, and healthy homes. And we are proud to support DC Water's residential leak repair assistance program, which will identify plumbing leaks and repair eligible leaks. Because clean water and healthy streams and rivers are so important to our residents, DOE has also made major strides over the past year in restoring the health of our waterways and other natural habitats. In the spring of 2024, DOE completed the restoration of Park Drive Stream, a tributary to Anacostia River in Ward 7's Hillcrest neighborhood. In addition to restoring 1,300 feet of stream, the project restored 4 stormwater outfall pipes, enhanced 4,000 square feet of existing wetland, and planted over 500 trees, 600 shrubs, and 1,000 native plants. Continue to reap benefits from the restoration of Watts Branch, which was completed in 2012, where in FY 24, we revised the FEMA flood maps in adjacent neighborhoods, taking more than 200 homes and schools out of the designated floodplain. This will allow families in Deanwood and far northeast to avoid burdensome insurance requirements and make it easier for those families and the district government to invest in these neighborhoods in the future. We are also making progress on many of our bigger and longer term restoration projects. In September 2024, DOE completed 30% design for the restoration of Oxen Run Stream in Ward 8 to its naturalized state. These draft concept designs present two alternative plans to comply with the National Environmental Policy Act. The long-term goal of the restoration is to restore natural hydrology, prevent erosion, reduce flood risk, improve water quality, and enhance and create wildlife habitat. DOE has also has released the Anacostia River Corridor Restoration Plan in November of 24. This plan, developed over 3 years, identifies and prioritizes specific strategies for restoring fish and wildlife habitat, improving water quality, adapting to climate change, and increase public access to the river corridor. In addition, this plan was developed with robust engagement efforts to foster strong community consensus around the proposal of the Anacostia River's future. We are planning for a healthier, more resilient future for the district in many other ways. DOE is working to implement actions from our Keep Cool DC plan to adapt to extreme heat. Currently, DOE is working with C40 cities in a cohort with 3 other cities to develop recommendations for how best to protect residents and rental units from unsafe indoor temperatures. The district, led by Serve DC and with DOE support, also won an award from C40 cities to pilot a volunteer heat and ambassador program to check our residents during heat emergencies. This pilot, drawing on the DC Volunteer Snow Program model and incorporating best practices from other jurisdictions, represents an important step in treating extreme heat with the kind of community attention and support that we extend to our neighbors in cold weather emergencies. We also look to the future as we prepare for a more energy efficient approach to buildings. DOE, partnering with the Department of Buildings, secured technical assistance from the New Buildings Institute to support development of the Net Zero Energy Code that the district is required by law to adopt by December 2026. Plan for robust engagement with the development community, architects, and other experts and stakeholders as we engage in this effort. Finally, DOE, together with our partners at the DC Office of Planning and agencies across the district government, continues to monitor our collective progress in achieving the goals of the Sustainable DC Plan. When we publish our next progress report, we will look forward to hearing from community members as we share qualitative and quantitative measures to track our projects toward achieving the mayor's vision for a healthier, greener, more livable city for all district residents. In conclusion, DOE expects to continue leading innovative stormwater management, increasing our resiliency, conserving and restoring our fisheries and wildlife, cultivating the district's green workforce, and continuing outreach and education to district residents and business to create a more sustainable city. Even though the district faces financial challenges in the coming year, we're committed to serving our residents, and we hope to work with council to best accomplish our mission. I want to close by thanking and acknowledging again the 100 of DC workers who show up every day to serve the residents of the city of District of Columbia. We appreciate the opportunity to share our accomplishments and plans for continuous improvement and look forward to continuing to work with the committee. I also want to acknowledge and thank the dozens of public witnesses again who showed up to testify at our performance last week. I've discussed their concerns and questions with my team, and I'm prepared to address any questions you would like to raise with us either now or after this hearing. This concludes my testimony. My team and I are happy to address your questions.
Thank you very much, Director Jackson. I want to note for the record, we're joined by Councilor Lewis George. And so we appreciate you being here. We're going to do 10-minute rounds of questions. I'm going to start with some questions for SEU, and then probably that'll be my first round. I'll turn to Councilor Lewis George. But don't worry, Director Jackson, I'm coming back to you. So wanted to start off with the SEU. I think that you had provided some documents to the committee that described customer satisfaction broken down by different projects. So residential, commercial, affordable home electrification, Train Green, all those seem to be pretty high. So that's good news. Customer satisfaction for Series 1 ranged from 90 to 100%. The Net Promoter Score was slightly lower, had a wider range. What do you think when we look at some of them were at about 76% satisfaction, but some of them were obviously the 90% satisfaction, for example, with commercial customers. What do you think helps explain the difference in our customer satisfaction that we're seeing? Any trends that you've identified as to where you see that? And then, of course, what do you do with that information? So if you see a 76, how do you approach the idea of, I want to get that to 100?
Absolutely. So appreciate the question here. So in terms of our overall customer satisfaction, we do our best to try and get surveys out to as many customers as we possibly can who work with us on any of a variety of our programs. These are where we are able to have the best penetration from our customer surveys. So as you said, across the board, above 90% in terms of overall customer satisfaction. The Net Promoter Score, which is kind of an industry term, I don't know how familiar folks are with it, but essentially just also measures not only just are they satisfied with the program or with the services, but are they actually going to go out and be a promoter of those services? Or are they going to be a neutral party, or are they going to be a detractor? So I think the important thing to note there is Net Promoter Score, typically an industry standard for Net Promoter Score from a brand perspective, you'd want to be at least above 20 for a Net Promoter Score. So that means you have more people that are promoting you than detracting from you, and all those that are kind of neutral don't count either way. So the fact anything above 50 would be kind of very good from an industry standpoint. So seeing that all of our Net Promoter Scores across the board are above 75 is a good sign. These are folks that are willing not only to say they had a good experience in the program, but also that they're willing to go out and tell others about it and promote those programs and tell other folks that they should be participating in those programs.
Got it. All right. So a net promoter score, I shouldn't be looking at this as a customer satisfaction. A net promoter score is different than a customer satisfaction.
Yes.
And that explains the difference as to why I see a 76%, which I shouldn't be viewing as, you got 24 points to make up. In fact, I should be viewing that differently, right?
Yes.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you for the context on that. One of the things that we frequently in this committee get a lot of concerns and questions around from residents has to do with residential solar installation and the interconnection issues with Pepco. We'll have a lot of folks that want to go solar, a lot of folks that will be doing that. They either get hit with very significant costs by Pepco that kind of became a surprise and become cost prohibitive to make that switch, or they just have big delays with interconnection issues. How much of that is something that SCU has encountered in the work that you're doing, and how do you communicate with, be it Pepco or the Public Service Commission or other partners, to work through those interconnection issues?
Absolutely. Great question. So in our Solar for All, which is where we perform most of the work on solar for the DCSEU, for years, we worked closely with DOEE and Pepco. We have regular meetings with Pepco to talk about all of the different projects that we have in our pipeline, so that they know in advance, where those projects are located, if those projects will need infrastructure grid upgrades as a part of that, to provide a level of predictability. I think in terms of our contractors, that's what our contractors that we work with, and I think that's what residents are all looking for, is a level of predictability of what costs might look like. So that is one way that we work closely with both our client DOEE and Pepco to ensure that we're ahead of those issues from a timing perspective, but also from a cost perspective. I'll defer a bit to DOEE, but certainly I know that there are efforts underway that we are supporting in front of the PSC to try and address some of those concerns in terms of being able to have predictability of costs for interconnections, if there are going to be any cost letters or any grid upgrades that are necessary as part of that. So that's some of the ways that we're working to make sure that we're ahead of it, that we're communicating effectively with DOEE and Pepco. And then I think, moving forward in the future, those efforts are underway in front of the PSC, and we'll be supporting DOEE and helping get information from our contractors to deliver that message back to the PSC.
Okay, so with the Public Service Commission then, am I hearing you correctly? The SCU doesn't communicate directly with the Public Service Commission. You do that with DOEE, so DOEE takes the lead to the PSC and you're in a supportive role?
Both. I mean, we certainly have submitted comments in the past and represented, our work in front of the PSC, but we certainly work closely with DOEE as well on those comments and on that feedback to the PSC as a result of the work around Solar for All. Okay.
All right. That's helpful. A large amount of what the SCU does is, just big projects, big work, Solar for All, projects like that. A space that you also are available for DC residents is with the rebate application process. What are the trends that we've seen as you've looked at individuals applying for rebates as well as you providing those rebates? For example, what have we seen the last couple of years with electric heat pumps? Are you seeing more people apply for electric heat pump rebates, switching to a digital thermostat, programmable thermostat, so that you can control your energy uses better. At some point, you eventually get everybody. But what are you seeing in trend lines with that? Just would like to see if you can kind of expand on where are you seeing different trends emerge, and then how does that help you tailor your approaches for that rebate program?
Great question. So typically what we've seen in terms of trends is that rebate activity will follow the amount of the rebate that's being offered. So in the past, we've done some activities where we've increased smart thermostat rebates. We've tried to make it easier for folks to apply to those smart thermostat rebates. Several years ago, we offered a coupon code, working with a national manufacturer of the smart thermostats to make it much easier for them, for DC residents to apply. So I think the rebate amounts certainly drive the activity and the trends there. Certainly across the board, we've seen a slight uptick in heat pumps. The technology's gotten better. It's definitely more widespread. More people are talking about it. I think the activities on the federal level are helping that as well. And then going into 2025, we were incredibly grateful to work with DOE to stand up a new offering, the DC electrification rebates, which are significant increases in those rebates for heat pumps, for heat pump water heaters, excuse me, for induction and electric stoves, for heat pump dryers, for folks to switch from gas dryers, and then also the electrical upgrades needed to make those upgrades in their homes. So panel upgrades, heavy ups, and electrical circuits. As Director Jackson alluded to, each household will be able to get up to $15,000 towards efficiency rebates, most of those for electrification, the highest ones for electrification. So we've already seen a tremendous interest in those. We're getting out in the community to make sure that folks are aware of those, to take advantage of those. So I think that would be the main crux of it is, yes, we're seeing just a general kind of uptick in heat pump and that technology and interest and driving towards those. But the rebates are the amounts, and when we increase those amounts are what really drive us to be able to see that activity increase.
Okay. And related to this, correct me if I'm wrong here. My understanding is your rebate application process is tied to the fiscal year. And so an individual who makes a home improvement, let's say they do electric heat pump or an induction stove, they have to get their application in before the end of a fiscal year, correct?
So what we've tried to do with and obviously all of our programs follow an annual funding cycle. But what we've done with our residential rebates especially is people can go and reserve those rebates. And then we reserve those rebates for a certain amount of time. As we get towards the end of the fiscal year, anyone who's reserved that rebate in the kind of late August, early September timeframe, we make sure we're reaching out to them actively, phone calls, emails, et cetera, to let them know what the kind of drop dead date is for them to get out their information in so that they can secure and receive their rebates.
I guess what I'm trying to get is, why do we tie it to the fiscal year? So for example, somebody's doing a big project and they're doing it in August and September. They get their receipts, they pull everything together, but it's, October 2nd is when they actually sit down on the computer, pull it up and start doing the rebate process. They're all of a sudden ineligible, right?
If that work was completed before September 30th and the purchases and all the receipts show before September 30th, what we will do is we will set the final date for when we need to have all that information submitted as late into October as we possibly can before we have to submit our invoice to DOE. And obviously we have to claim those savings on an annual basis. All of these are designed to help us meet our performance goals, achieve energy savings, achieve greenhouse gas emissions reductions. So we try to set that date as late in October, communicate, early and often with folks to make sure they know what that.
Require that person who made that improvement to do that before the end of the fiscal year. I don't propose a solution right now, but we've definitely had this come up where people who are making these types of improvements in that part of the year end up missing out on a rebate that they otherwise thought they were eligible for. And it feels like certainly the reporting piece of the fiscal year makes sense that you need to report that data out. But it seems like from just the way that people are going to live their lives and do improvements, there needs to be some type of rolling period during that time frame. Otherwise, you're going to have a chunk of folks who all of a sudden thought they're going to be eligible. They aren't, and they're ineligible for that rebate. So perhaps that's something working with DOE and SCU to think about how to cover that kind of shoulder season of a fiscal year. Again, recognizing the reality that you got to get reports in, but I feel like we see plenty of other opportunities where people get rebates or other type of opportunities that we want to use as incentives, and they don't get shut out of it just because of the fiscal year date. That makes sense?
It does.
I mean, tell me why not?
No, it makes sense. The challenge is purely an administrative financial challenge in terms of the funding. So because their funding is tied to that fiscal year and there's no rollover funding, so their funding ends on, September 30th, then a new pot of funding starts October 1. Because there's no, as if it was a capital funded project,
Right.
it would roll right over. There's not a problem. But because it's not funded through one of those funding mechanisms, that's what causes the abrupt stop. And
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
what's needed,
That's
that
what it is.
bridge.
That diagnoses the problem. I'd like to think about what could be a
Need-
solution to
we need a
create a bit of that
bridge.
rollover and
Correct.
bridge during that time period.
That's what we've been trying to figure out, trying to come up with how do we bridge that, because we know it's there. So working with, the financial team is how do we come up with a mechanism that would allow us to cover that gap.
Yep.
Yep.
Got it. Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Let me turn to Councilor Lewis George for a round of questions.
Thank you. Want to start, Director, with in fiscal year 25, we provided DOE with 300,000 to pilot invasive species management work in DC's forest patches. Something that I remain committed to sort of seeing through and making sure we're doing the work here in the district to maintain our forested lands. Have you been able to hire the staff person yet to lead this work? And have you been able to execute the contract for the labor yet?
So we actually have brought the contract in. We've, the team has been evaluating the work that's being done with that funding. They have a contractor. They've identified plots that they could work on that would probably maximize the uses of those funds.
Okay.
And so work is moving. There was some, question was brought up last week. There's some, found out more about it. It is moving. I understand why the resident has a concern because of the way we had set it up wasn't optimal. But again, that was a learning part since it was our first time doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But we are moving forward with the identified spaces we have. We have staff there. I don't believe we've hired the one FTE. I think the work is being done within our fisheries wildlife team.
Okay.
But they're executing. I'll put it like that. The short version is they're executing. We have a contractor. We have an integrated pest management plan that we've established on how the work can be done by the contractor, and it's moving forward.
Okay. And have you all met with community groups that sort of volunteer to do similar work yet?
The team has had those conversations. That's what came out to my attention last week.
Okay.
So we'll continue those conversations because they brought up some good points. Again, once I started asking some more questions, I see how we originally set it up, and it's set up a certain way right now based on the funding and based on what we can get done. But we definitely want to continue to work with the community to ensure that, everybody, because every plot to us maybe, or to others may be a big thing.
Yeah.
But for each community, each neighborhood, that plot is like, that plot.
That's
And so-
right.
And that's
Yeah.
why we have to look at it that way. So we recognize that, absolutely.
Okay, great. And thus far, sort of what have you learned from the experience with the pilot that we should take into consideration in regards to whether we reintroduce the bill or in regards to whether we reintroduce the bill?
Well, our lessons learned right now are clearly around the scope.
Okay.
Right, we've identified what we need to do. We look forward to, having those conversations in the future, but we
Okay.
have learned some things, and we know that community engagement is going to be a big part of this because, like I said, every one individual park, in fact, Ms. Bashan, Langdon Park, I understand where she's coming from because that's her park.
Yeah.
And that ownership that they've taken is very important, and we want to recognize that for each one. So we know that it can't just be one size fit all approach. So we have an integrated pest management plan. But that plan is the way IPM works. You have a plan, but then you have individual projects. So you modify based on your ceiling, but each group
Yeah.
is different. And so that's why I understand her concerns and what they were trying to accomplish versus what we're trying to accomplish on some of the larger sites, which is the direction we're going right now.
Great.
But we look forward to having a conversation in the
Wonderful.
future about that.
And I know you haven't hired the FTE yet because your team is sort of doing the work internally, but do you have intentions of hiring the FTE?
So based on current conditions, if our team can handle what we have right now, we're going to continue to handle right
Gotcha.
now. But if things change, that'll definitely be on the plate. I
Okay.
feel like that.
What I'm gonna ask is sort of like, I guess, how many more months should I give you before we can have a status update meeting that sort of talks about where you all are with the pilot?
I can get back, my team can get back with you with a time.
Okay.
Or you give us a time and then I guess we'll just have to go with that, one way or the other.
I mean, yes, I was doing a nice, I actually, DOE is one of my favorite agencies. So in other agency, I'd be like, I'm gonna meet with you in 4 months, but you all, I actually trust your due diligence
Well,
to
I
do
mean,
work here in the district, so.
But if you throw us a date,
We'll meet that
we'll be prepared. We'll be prepared for that date.
Okay, great. I look forward to sort of seeing where you are in that pilot and following up and just having an update meeting on the pilot. My team remains sort of committed to doing the work to deal with our forested patches, and we're still working with those community partners who you heard from today and who I still we talk to on a weekly basis just to make sure that we are moving in the direction that our communities have the greatest benefit. So thank you for the work thus far, and I look forward to continuing that work. As you know, I don't believe there's any safe amount of lead in water, as you noted, for our young children here in the district. I know you all, you talk about it in your opening, which I was very excited to sort of hear some of the work you're doing. Wanted to ask sort of how many childcare facilities did we service this year as far as putting in filters or doing some remediation work?
Sure. So we have a rolling number. So like 546. That may be a number, but that number is based on right
Yeah.
here. The way the program is set up is as new centers are given to us from Ozzy,
Okay.
we immediately
That's
reach
what I
out to those centers and then, and set up a time to go in and do testing. And then we'll do those initial testing, at which point then we also install those initial filters. Depending on the type of filter that's being installed, staff can take care of that. We also have a contractor in place that handles specialty type filters, or what I would call inline filters. These are filters that would go underneath the sink because they can't have an attachment at the endpoint.
At the endpoint, yeah.
And so majority though are endpoints. So we carry those in stock. We have inspectors that go out, do those change outs when they're needed. So we have the database tracking when they were installed, when that 90-day period's coming up that they need to be changed out. And we go ahead and change those filters out. The same thing with contractor, working with them, they know what that track is once they've installed the inline filters.
Okay.
So we do testing. Once we install the filters, it's more or less continuing to track the change out of the filters when needed.
Yeah.
Or if a center calls and say, hey, we just want you to change our filters. The light came on, we want you to change it.
Okay.
And we'll go out and change it. One thing we have learned over the years, unfortunately, we would always leave a pack of filters like, hey, here's your filter. We put your system in. Here's some extras. If you need to change it, you can change it. Didn't work the way we thought it would. And so we do have to, we spend a lot of time with the inspectors going out just
Yeah.
to spend that to go out there 4 or 5 in the morning to do a 10-minute job, or actually
Right.
5-minute job to change it out. But again, it's a program that has evolved and has become very effective and efficient at what they do.
Great.
The inspectors that have been working there, they've been doing it for a while. The database has been very strong and constantly being reviewed, modify how we can get better data. So that's why I said the number right now, I believe the centers that we're working on is like 546.
Okay.
But that number fluctuates because
Okay.
centers close out, centers open up. But it's something that the team, we have a fully committed team, and that team is fully staffed to continue to do that work.
Got it. When you all get the notification from OSSI of like new childcare centers that are opening, what's sort of the time between when OSSI identifies you and you all go out and
Several
Okay.
days. So
Several days. Okay.
like say, if they notice, if they
Wonderful.
we give the list on Friday, then we're reaching out on that Monday,
Got
Tuesday
it.
of that following week, just to, see where they're at. What can we do? Because we have to, get them acclimated to what our program is.
Right.
And then how we interact with them, and then what's the best time. And going through that kind of security clearance or comfort for them to allow us into their facility, right? We're kind of cold calling, hey, we're district environment, we do a filtering program. And there may be some hesitation at first, so it takes time to build that trust up even initially before they'll even let us in.
Okay.
So, yeah, we just work through those processes. But again, that was part of the learning over these years that we've been doing it now.
Okay, great. And then I had talked about you all being more in partnership with DC Water for sort of overall having sort of the lead pipes within the homes of childcare centers and places replaced, sort of making sure that they're doing their part as well. How have you all made improvements sort of with DC Water and the relationship to have them making sure they're actually replacing lead pipes versus
So actually we
us
have
depending
a,
on filters?
no, actually we have a good relationship with DC Water. We have regular meetings with them
Okay,
across all the avenues in terms of lead pipe or just DC Water in general.
yeah,
Working with all of our lead programs, whether it's lead pipes, CREAC, LPRAP, or all the other
Right.
programs. So we're having regular meetings. Actually, now we finally got to a point where it's like on a first name basis where the team staff can call each other and have those
Wonderful.
communications. So great communication with them when there's working closely. The new repair program that I mentioned, we were in conversation with them to make sure that that was moving. So we're just staying in continuous communication, and relationships we built over the past year have greatly improved, where there's a lot more transparency in how we work together.
okay, great. I want to make sure we continue that work up. Looks to have about 16 seconds. So I'll go to come to air quality for my next round. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. Director Jackson, let me just jump right into one of the elephants in the room. Federal funding. It's uncertain, it's frustrating to all of us, I know, and it's destabilizing, frankly. But recently, the city administrator was quoted saying that due to the federal action, it's paused about $140 million in green energy projects. That includes 17 million over 5 years to expand our electric vehicle charging infrastructure, which we were very excited to be working in partnership with you and DDOT and the city on. Pausing 62.4 million in solar panel installations in low-income and disadvantaged communities, and another 60 million in affordable housing energy efficiency projects. I know it's taken some time to be able to fully kind of try to digest what the scope is. And based on which day of the week and what court decision, it may change again tomorrow. But can you talk about how has the DOE team responded to this news thus far? And in what ways is it impacting your plans for this current fiscal year that we're in right now and the plans we thought we were making and FY26 and beyond?
Sure. So, yeah, the last 6 weeks have been quite interesting.
It's only been 6 weeks?
Yeah, that's it. Just about. But it's been very adaptive. It's been a learning curve. I think the statement you just referenced from the CA, because again, once this all happened, I've met with the CA quite frequently. For me, I'm comfortable, or should I say I'm confident, kind of in understanding better where our budget is, what the impacts are, and what we need to do as an agency to function in this new environment. I think in touching in that article, when I was given that article, I think there was a key word missing in that article, and that was the word new work, right? We've already, we started coming out in October 1st doing work based on the funding that we had through the grants. So if work was already started, like, if a home is already halfway under construction, we can't just not do it. So I think it's more that key word was very important to me, because we plan on finishing what we have. Any new thing that would happen would be paused or be revisited, but we're not looking to not do what we can with the dollars we have as a city, right? We do have money, we continue to do work. Those funds, the 62 million, the 58 million would have allowed us to expand, but it doesn't really stop us from, it stops us from going big, but it doesn't stop us from doing work. And so we're continuing to do the work. We're constantly monitoring what's going on, because like you said, it changes day to day. And so if I'm told something in 7 a.m, usually I'll wait until 5 p.m, see where we're at, because it's changing that rapidly. So we've developed a very, learned a lot from this, actually. So there was some good that came out of it in terms of how we interact with our financial, team, and learned a lot more about how the whole process of funding or drawdowns from federal grants and stuff works. And so that's been very, educational for us as a team to know how that process works. And now we have a very good, we put together a kind of like a short term, here's what we need to know from you guys. Can you provide us this information on a regular basis? Initially, so let us go and look at that, Rich, and then we'll come back to you. They came back and they said, okay, yeah, we can let you know when drawdown, how much the drawdowns can be. Or, if you submit your invoices to us, we can do drawdown on this kind of schedule. We can let you know what's accessible through the funding system, through the federal funding systems that we can pull from. And so having that information has been very instrumental for allowing us to continue to do our work, because we know, okay, right now we have access to all of our federal grants. So we know that because finance is going into all the federal systems that they normally would draw down from, they can see all of our grants. So that means we do have access. And so cool, we can continue to do business as usual within the confines that was kind of set for us, which is we're not doing new stuff, continue to finish up what we have, what's going on. Those are the things, let's look at them one by one. But PS can be taken care of. Those things that can be invoiced is getting an invoice. And right now everything's going through. And so we know we have access as of last Monday, I believe. Sorry, this past Monday. All the systems, federal systems are up and running for us. And again, there are certain parts of the whole pause of grants. Right now puts DOE kind of in the lead because a lot of those pauses have a direct impact on the work we're doing because of the Department of Energy and EPA. So we understand that. And so we're just learning the process, trying to get weekly reports from our financial team. So we're on top of what may or may not happen and just kind of preparing for the next set of, curveballs that may come our way, right? So we know where we're at right now. Met with the entire team, meet with my deputies, meet with all the managers, say, hey, we're in a good place. Let's continue to do what we're doing, stay focused on what we have to do, and we'll make adjustments after the dust kind of settles. And we just stay in touch with the CA and his team to make sure they're on top of where we're at as well.
Okay, thank you. I expect many more curveballs ahead. Last week, we had the public portion of the hearing. One of the most common refrains you heard and I heard was in support of swift implementation and continued funding for the Healthy Homes Act. And I appreciate we kind of got an update mid-hearing in terms of the number of homes that have already gone through a energy modernization. Also appreciate that just this Monday, we got the mayor submitted the implementation plan through and from DOE, so appreciate that. What I want to make sure I understand is how many modernizations have been completed to date, and how many do we have in the pipeline? Can we just, since that number got batted around a little bit last week, just want to give you a chance to make sure you share a quick update on what those numbers are based on what you got from your team.
Right. So this is when we did 0, then went from 0 to 4. Gotcha. So right. So the way we've explained it, the way it's been explained to me, and it makes sense. If you look at what we did in 23, the way the program works, and it kind of goes back to what my friend right here just said about the funding, is it takes a ramp up period at the end of the fiscal year, every fiscal year, right? So believe in the end of 23, we did something like 76 homes, right? The first quarter was 4, then it was 10, then it was 36, and then 37, right? That's kind of how the quarters broke down. Same thing happened this year where the first quarter, again, in gathering information with regards to the new federal money that's coming in and just getting ramped up. The first quarter was slow. Then we started the second quarter. We went into those 4 that got complete. Right now, there's a total of 155 for the year that's been queued up. They're in the queue. What I mean by in the queue is these are residents that have expressed interest in being part of the program. Of those 155, roughly, and the numbers aren't exact, But of the 155, 33 have applications that have been approved and signed, and work will start in those. Since that meeting we had last week of the 4, there are 6 that are currently being completed. They'll move through those next set of 30, and then the goal is to get to that 155. So that's kind of what we have in play with, and I know there's a higher number, I believe, for the end game, but right now what we have in the queue is like 155 homes. We know we have 35 that we can actually hit right now because all the paperwork's approved. We'll work on the rest of that to get approval of paperwork and then continue to move forward. So we do expect more homes to get done in the third quarter, more homes to be done in the fourth quarter, because that's just how the process works each fiscal year. Again, if we got rid of that gap, that bridge, the change, that's kind of, that would be a changer because now you have more
Okay.
flow.
I'm very open to working around that bridge, right? So that you don't feel like each fiscal year you start off with a very small number that first quarter and you're ramping up again. But what I'm trying to make sure that we can fully understand is the council had appropriated funds via the SETF for the Healthy Homes implementation.
Mhm.
Part of what DOE has talked about is expanding existing programs to fold in those electrification and modernization efforts. So what I need to have a better understanding and accounting for is of the funds that we identified through SETF to implement a new law and an expansion of that effort. How do I distinguish between those projects that you were already going to be doing because you have some existing programs and what Healthy Homes law puts on top and requires further? How do I distinguish between what you were already doing and going to do versus the new funding and the new requirements we put in through the Healthy Homes Act?
Okay, so I'm gonna let my deputy director, Nick Berger, come up and he can give you that level of detail.
Fantastic. And Mr. Berger, just if you'll introduce yourself when you start for the record.
Happy to do so, and I stepped out, so I missed your swearing in, so I best do that too.
If you raise your right hand, do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning. It's on the morning? Yeah, good morning. Nick Berger, Deputy Director for the Energy Administration. So to your question, when I talk about both the work that you all put in front of us through the Healthy Homes Act and sort of the federal work that supports similar goals around home electrification for low-income households, I always describe it as sort of fortuitous timing. So our team, in conjunction with Ben and his team at the DCSEU, had for the past few years been setting up pilot programs. One, the Affordable Home Electrification Program. You can think of that as the small building program. And the other is the Affordable Home Retrofit Accelerator. And you can think of that as the large building program, all about affordable housing, all focused on low-income residents. Those two programs had been stood up in a pilot capacity through different sources of funding at a fairly small scale. But what it meant was, as the federal rebate funds came online, as the Healthy Homes Act came online, and the SETF increased to support that electrification work came online, we were in the good position to have two programs that we could channel those funds, whether federal or local, into and expand the capacity. So to get to your question, absent the additional SETF funds, the scope, say, of the Affordable Home Electrification Program, which is kind of what we've been talking about recently, this kind of single family home focused program, would have remained quite small probably, right? We did the pilot a couple of years ago, had I think 20, 25 homes in that scale. So as the director just said, this year we're aiming to do many more than that. We set ambitious goals. We'll see if we make them. It's a learning experience. But that increase in SETF is really what's driving the increased scale of those programs. As we are able to bring the federal funds into those programs, we're going to increase that scale even more. Does that help?
Mm-hmm. Yes. What I'm trying to make sure that from the committee's oversight perspective is understanding the numbers. So I agree. Yeah. And listen, I'm not as interested in like, it's got to be named one thing or another, right? So if the implementation is, if we're consistent with what it is that the law requires, which is this increase, we have the funds identified and we are increasing and building this out. If you have existing pilot programs that this allows to scale and build off of, got it. But what I think the community needs to understand is the actual numbers. How many homes are we talking about? I want to make sure we understand an accounting of this is how many dollars we're expending on this. This is how many homes we're doing. I also think we want to tell the story. this is how much savings we've created for that homeowner. This is how we've lowered energy costs. So as we do that, that's kind of the heart of what I'm trying to get at is how are we identifying what the pilot projects would have already been doing versus what Healthy Homes Act is now allowing,
Sure.
quantifying it.
Yeah. So first of all, just commitment to get you any specific numbers. I want to, as I think you've heard, avoid giving you numbers, claiming they're specific and then having to revise them. But again, let's take the affordable electrification program, and I'd welcome Ben to correct or fix anything I say here. But in fiscal year 25, we allocated somewhere in the ballpark, I think, of $7.5 million to that program. Is that roughly correct? So that translates to, on an average cost basis of 32,000 per household, about 300 homes. So that was the capacity that we had kind of set our sights at. And again, all of that was functionally new money, because again, the scale of that pilot program for AHEP 2 years ago was, I think, around $600,000. So that's a net increase of $7+ million. As we are, you've heard, we have 155 projects that are sort of at various stages in that pipeline, and Ben and the team are working to expand that pipeline even as they're doing existing projects. So will we get to the 300? I don't know, but we're going to try, and we'll be, of course, happy to come back and tell you how far we got. To the question of the impacts, we've started looking at that. So we're able to look at household energy use directly for homes that have gone through the program. And the numbers are preliminary. So I want to come back, but we've run some numbers on projects that were completed in FY24, and we saw, ballpark 40% average savings in terms of energy for those households. We want to do more analysis. We want to look at what the total bill impact is, because if we take a home that was running gas heating and maybe had an electric water heater, and we convert it to all electric, that electric bill is going to go up. It's not going to go up a ton because we're putting in much more efficient stuff than there was before, but we're shifting from the gas bill to the electric bill. So you'd expect the electric bill to go up. You'd expect the gas bill to go down. If we can fully electrify a home, which we did in 41 of the 81 cases in FY24, meaning we converted everything, that household's gas bill will drop to zero. But more importantly, if that household then removes their gas meter, removes their gas bill, they save an extra $200 a year because you pay $200 just for the privilege of having a gas account, right? It's a fixed cost, right? So we're going to go back, and we're working on this now to actively look at, for actual homes that went through these programs, what is the savings? And again, very happy to report that back out.
Okay. I definitely would like to follow up after the hearing to get that. And I agree with you. I've had this conversation with somebody previously where someone made a switch from gas to electric and then said, I'm using more electricity now. Well, yeah, you're using a lot less gas now, but if you switch from a gas appliance to an electric appliance, logic would tell you you're going to use a little bit more electric. But if you're using a more efficient system and your overall cost burdens go down, that's what we're trying to achieve as well. So I look forward to getting more on that.
Can I one thing?
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
very briefly. One of the things we've talked with the SEU about that's really important, and they're working with households on the front end to help them understand, is sometimes we're just taking a bunch of services, water heating services, cooking services, air conditioning services, and we're converting those into more efficient electric. You get the same stuff you had before. Sometimes a household is getting more than they had before, right? So if you had a gas heating system, but you had no air conditioning, you didn't have any window units, you didn't have a central unit, you had no cooling, right? Which, as we talked about in the director's testimony, is a challenge in the district. And so as the SEU is doing their work to electrify these households, in many cases, they're getting things they didn't have before, like air conditioning. And again, you have a service that you didn't have, and so you're going to consume some energy to provide that service. The question is, what's the value of that? And we think that the value of keeping a house, at 70 degrees, 75 degrees instead of 98, 99 degrees, is pretty high. So it's just another thing. And the DCSU has been a really good job of coming up with an energy estimate calculator that they're running for the houses that go through these programs to help them say, before they even agree to the program, look, this is what we predict is going to come on the back end. Might vary a little bit, but we think you're going to achieve this amount of savings on your bill overall. And we can remind you that maybe in this case, you're going to get something you didn't have, like air conditioning.
I think it's a great point. It's a harder thing to quantify, but it's an important part of that. That's great. Thank you. Sticking with electrification for a second. As you all know, the Public Service Commission recently issued an order in formal case 1154 and the case is related to the Project Pipes proposal from Washington Gas. Essentially, Public Service Commission rejected the motion from the Office of People's Counsel to dismiss what was then renamed District Safe Plan, while also extending Project Pipes 2 until the end of 2025. DOEE submitted multiple filings related to Project Pipes, as well as the PSC docket on implementation of climate business plans for the district utility. Can you talk about the strategy that DOEE is using around the filings in the PSC cases? You don't have to weigh in on everything. So when and why does DOE choose to weigh in on certain cases before the PSC?
So we don't have to weigh in on everything, and we frankly wouldn't be able to. The volume of information coming through that Public Service Commission process is pretty immense. Just as an example, about a week before Christmas, and people are off and off, we received through the PSC formal questions from WGL, our gas utility, about 200 of them that we then had to sit down and answer over the next couple of weeks between, roughly late December and early January. So when we get those kinds of requests, we have to be thoughtful about, where else we weigh in, where it's optional, because those kinds of requests aren't optional for us. So I think the way we approach our Public Service Commission work, we do this through the Office of the Attorney General, who are our lawyers, but it's really us making those sort of policy decisions, is we try to figure out what our priorities are. What are the main things that we are trying to drive progress on in the district, through the PSC in conjunction with their regulatory authority? And a lot of that, I think, comes down to making sure that we're operating with full information. So we got those 200 questions from WGL. We send some questions to them ourselves. And that gives us information that helps us make better decisions. And from there, then it's thinking about what are our climate laws, what are our energy cost priorities, and how does that dictate the cases where we weigh in, the points we try to make, the working groups we sit in on. We could spend an enormous amount of time, which we already spend a fair bit of time. We could spend an enormous amount of time on this. And does that help? That's our sort of prioritization approach.
Yeah, I was struck by Commissioner Beverly wrote in his dissent on a recent order, and these are Commissioner Beverly's words, quote, "District Safe is not a new plan or a plan at all. It is essentially the continuation of Pipes 2, just rebranded as District Safe. To me, this entire exercise has become a waste of time and money with no real benefit to the climate," end quote. And part of the concern that I have is, certainly from this committee's perspective and trying to look at it, if we're talking about a proposed $215 million pipeline replacement project, which is being asked the ratepayers to pay, so that's our residents, how does that fit or not fit into our overall climate commitment, not just goals, but our commitments and what is required in law? How is DOEE, when you are faced with making decisions about strategically, when do you make comments, when do you not make comments, in the face of something like that, how is DOEE considering where and how to weigh in, and how that matches up with obviously the mission that DOEE works toward, but also just the overall district climate goals?
I mean, what I would say on there is, in hearing those things, we would then work with our council, work with the mayor's council, and come up with a plan that makes sense, and then we will move forward with that plan. But that's, we kind of know what those impacts are, like you said, that pricing, kind of like sticker shock. So knowing that, we would just bring in the right parties and have those discussions with them and see the best path forward.
Yeah. And I think in addition to that, it's not just the one-time rate payment costs of that, right? It's it's an infrastructure decision that generations will be living with, whatever decision gets made here. And so I think that absolutely intersects with our overall climate goals, and not what we're signing up for to live with tomorrow, but what the next generations have based on this decision and what's in front of the Public Service Commission.
I think that should be a part of it, absolutely, because it is a long term. It's never about the short. It's always about looking down the road, because that's where it hits at.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I add? So to add on that exact point, it is the long-term nature of this really can't be understated. Both because any investments we make today, we're going to be, as you said, paying off over, years, if not in some cases, sort of generations, right? But the scope of the problem really is pretty immense. I mean, I think one of the things that all of the groups, or maybe most of the groups, certainly DOE agrees with in the context of Project Pipes and our gas system in the district is that we have a lot of very old pipes and some of them are in very bad condition, right? So in some ways, that's not a fact in dispute. The question is, what do we do about it? And how fast can we act? So there's something, I think, around the area of 400 to 450 miles of pipes that everyone, WGL, the federal government has said are out of date. They're in bad shape. Some of them may actually be leaking. Some of them are probably going to leak at some point. Some of them could fail more catastrophically. But at the current pace of work that WGL has been doing over the past 5 years, it would take us 100 years to replace all those pipes. And by that point, we're going to have other pipes now that are in need of replacement. So the way we think about Project Pipes and that challenge is, how do we tackle the problem, take it seriously, take safety seriously, but do it in the most prudent, cost-effective way, right? So I talked earlier about, we try to get good information through the Public Service Commission process. So one of the things we learned in one of our questions to WGL was that when you look at that Project Pipes district safe proposal, a substantial fraction of it, I think, don't quote me, about 70% of it goes to what are called service line replacements. So this is about that relatively small pipe that goes from somewhere in your sidewalk or your street up to your gas meter in your probably front yard, right? Those pipes are also, in many cases, quite old. They could be brittle. They could be at risk of failure. And a lot of what the District Safe program is proposing to do is to replace those pipes. And WGL has said through the Public Service Commission that the average cost for each of those service line replacements is about $35,000, right? It's a lot of money. For reference, when Ben and the team go to electrify an entire home and replace all the gas equipment, giving them new appliances, stuff that works, stuff that's not out of warranty, the cost can vary a lot, but we budget about $30,000 to $32,000 per home. So it's less than that one service line replacement. So as we're thinking about how to prudently and safely and appropriately tackle this 100-year problem, we think one way we should be doing that aggressively is thinking about not replacing those pipes, not digging up a front yard, dropping a new pipe into the ground. And that's really, as a household, all you get. So you get your flower bed dug up and you get a new pipe that you'll never see. But actually just saving that money and maybe redirecting it toward electrification, right? We know we can cover the cost of an average house for the same price that we could cover the cost of that pipe. It gets us a lot more benefits, we think. We think households would sort of choose that approach if given the choice. So that's one part of the solution. It's not the whole solution. We also want to think about, for those pipes that are probably going to need to be in the ground longer, decades potentially, but are at risk of failure, what do we do about them? WGL's approach is really solely to dig up the road and replace those pipes. We think there are other things that we should look at, and this is what we advocate and push for the PSC to consider. One example, there was a great session I attended on Monday at the NARUC conference, another acronym, but it's basically our utility regulator conference, talking about advances in technology on pipe relining. So instead of digging up an entire 1,000-foot section of road, blocking off, taking people's parking away, you just dig a hole at each end of that pipe and you run a new liner through that pipe. And we won't go to the details, we don't have time, but the point is in many cases that can work just as well as that massive pipe replacement, costs about 50% as much. So if we're looking at this big problem and we're facing this, according to WGL, massive bill to solve it, we need to be thinking about different ways of solving it that save money and provide more benefits. That's kind of the framework.
Yeah, I think that framework makes a lot of sense to me. And I think it's also grounded in which you started off right at the beginning around, it's rooted in also making sure safety is front of mind. Everybody wants to make sure that we are addressing any type of leak, any type of safety issue, and that's first and foremost. And then it's okay, let's think about what are our longer term strategic goals, what's our most cost efficient way, and using technology in different ways to still achieve all those goals. So I appreciate that. And I know it's a conversation we'll continue certainly having, and the whole city is going to continue to have, and the Public Service Commission will have for some time. But I think that the general outline that the agency has mapped out is the right way to be kind of scrutinizing a decision like this. So thank you. I wanted to, one other electrification piece I wanted to turn to, speaking of our acronyms, the ERLIF, if I got my acronym correct, from the Green Bank. DOE is, and forgive me if I'm not describing this the right way, sub-awarding or subcontracting, sub-awarding the ERLIF funding to the DC Green Bank as opposed to managing that in-house in DOE. Is it that the program is just kind of by design, it's built around financing rather than grant awards? And so that's why that makes the most decision is not to do that in-house, but you use a partner like a Green Bank to build it. Is that, am I understanding kind of the rationale behind the decision?
Yeah, that's accurate.
Okay, all right, that's helpful. Let me hit a couple other solar question. In the agency's pre-hearing responses, you mentioned the Public Service Commission's convening a series of technical conferences related to interconnection on solar, and we talked about that a moment ago with SCU, and that interconnection continues to delay our Solar for All projects. I know just on individual household level, again, I have constituents who reach out to me with delays because of interconnection. I've talked with Chairman Thompson at PSC to make sure he's aware of that, and he very much is, and we've talked through some strategies the PSC is going to be working on. How do you believe these conferences are actually working? Are they helping move that ball forward and getting towards a faster resolution for our Solar for All program, individual homeowners? Just want to give you a chance to kind of share, what do you see the prospect of that working?
Yeah, I'll start it off, but yeah, I think there's been progress made. I think Pepco recognizes the challenge there, and they've been receptive to try to how best to resolve that challenge for them and the residents and people that they work with. So it has been receptive. They have been receptive, and I think we're finally on a path that would allow us to correct that problem, because again, that is a major stepping stone right now, and it needs to be corrected. But everybody recognizes that, and now they're trying to work toward a solution. But next, if you want to add to it.
No, I think that's well said. I mean, it's been a pretty well documented problem, and it's been around for a while. So this is not a new issue. I think the public is pretty aware of some of the high bills that households get when they go to put solar on their single family home. I think every council member has experienced residents saying, like, why is Pepco trying to charge me $20,000 for this? I think probably what's less well understood is that there are the sort of parallel problems that need addressing on the side of our larger solar facilities. So rooftop solar on single family homes is awesome. It's great. It's great for residents. It's great for the energy system in the district. But you know, the scale of what we call community solar facilities is much larger, right? And for those facilities, we're seeing, you know, sometimes year plus delays, bills that seem sort of inconsistent with what we might expect or what solar developers expect or what we see from other jurisdictions, bills that get revised very late in the process. These are some of the challenges. And so, but back to the director's point, I would agree. I think what we're seeing out of the Public Service Commission recently is very promising. You know, they've set up some working groups. Those working groups are meeting and making progress. Again, I think there's some general recognition of the problem. I don't know that we're all in alignment yet on the solutions, and we have some thoughts on what those solutions need to include. But the discussions and the pace of progress is encouraging. And I think even in the couple of years I've been at the agency, I think we're seeing really much more forward progress now than we had, 2 years ago.
Yeah, that's good news. Mr. Burdick, anything you would add to that from the SEU's perspective?
No, the only thing that I think would add is, the feedback that we hear from contractors, especially when it relates to community renewable energy facilities, community solar, is just when they get into these projects, they have a funding stack and they need a level of predictability about what the costs may look like for any portion of that project, including interconnection. And I think that's the feedback we've consistently heard from developers and contractors. And I think that's the feedback that they're providing in these working groups. So predictability of costs. Certainly we don't want exorbitant costs either, but predictability of costs is kind of the most important piece of that.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Director Jackson, let me switch back to a couple of agency management questions. in response to our questions regarding procurement issues, in the responses, the agency had mentioned issues with CBEs engaging in quote price manipulation. My understanding that it was that was referred to OIG, but then that didn't have really a resolution. Could you say more about the issue? Is there something that we're experiencing with CBEs in particular? Is it something that is a larger issue? Can you just expand? This was from question 30 on page 15, in case you need a reference.
Sure. So, so to me, it's not just CBEs. This is basically an issue with smaller contractors versus larger, deeper pocketed type contractors, right? The type of work that we do sometimes have to have contractors that have that level, that bandwidth to do the work. But because of the way the process is set up, a smaller contractor can come in and say, I can do the work. You know, we have the capability of doing it, put it at a price that makes sense to them. They may be awarded that contract. And then we come to find that once the work is started, once they start executing the scope of work that we've lined up, they're not capable of doing the work, or the work is beyond the capacity, whether it be staffing, whether it be the actual technology needed for a particular project. So a lot of the environmental projects that we work on, you know, in some instances when you're working on an environmental project, you want to remediate a site. Until you really break open the ground, you really don't know what you have.
Mm-hmm.
The contractor may be able to do it if it's a straightforward remediation. You know, we're going in, we're taking out certain cubic foot of contaminated soil and we're moving it on. But when they break the ground, all of a sudden, it's no longer just a plot of soil that's contaminated. Now you have, it's been commingled because you've discovered that there's groundwater running in there, or the size or scope of the contamination is larger than what it was. Now this contractor is no longer capable of doing it with the pricing that was set originally because they didn't expect that.
So is that more an issue that of technical vetting by OCP, or is that on the agency? I'm trying to, obviously a lot of our contractors are run through OCP.
I think we're doing a much better job educating OCP and some of the sister agencies on when we say environmental doesn't mean if a company says, oh yeah, I'm an environmental contractor, but your primary duty is solid waste, that doesn't put you in the same category as hazardous waste or remediation of soils, even though you fall under the general category of environment. And so, but because they come under environment, they're saying you need to consider this group because they say they could do the work because they have the capabilities of a environmental contractor. And so it's working with sister agencies to make them understand just because they have the title does not necessarily mean they could do the work at our scope for a project. So that's the challenge. You know, for example, for the sediment project, we know that we have to do some dredging. Dredging is going to be interesting. It could be some, you know, hiccups in there. We don't know. But if we vet the contractors properly, we should be able to get some good contractors. But we also know that there'll probably be smaller contractors so they could do the work, but it's not a straight dredging job. It's just not dredging for depth. This is dredging for contaminated sediment, which is slightly different because there's other parameters that need to be put in place with regards to once you remove that sediment, what are you going to do with it and how you handle it? That takes it to a different category. So we'll have to educate, working with OCP to make sure they truly understand the scope and the complexity of the projects we have.
I don't expect OCP to be the technical environmental experts.
Mhm.
That's going to be us looking at you, but I do want to make sure that OCP knows how to vet and ask the right questions so that
Yes.
the technical experts in your shop are helping guide that decision. So we get somebody who knows what they're doing.
And like I said, it's gotten better.
Yeah.
Because I think everybody's learning from some of these missteps that have happened in the past. And so they're pausing a little bit, saying, well, maybe we need to listen a little more, you know, give us more information and reaching out better. And so, and the staff that we have now at the agency is more seasoned in terms of the projects we do. There was a period where we were kind of picking, you know, a new OCP point person would come to us, but that has The person that's been there now has been there almost 3 years. They're much more educated on how DOE does work and what the expectations are for our contractors for a lot of environmental issues. That has helped a great deal.
Good. Okay. I've got a couple more kind of personnel related questions. Then we've been joined by Councilmember Zachary Parker. I'll turn to Councilor Parker for a couple of questions in and around. Looking at some of the personnel vacancies. So from your pre-hearing responses, we've got about 60 positions that are currently vacant at DOE. What jumped out to me though was 17 of those were energy program specialist positions. 22 of those were environmental protection specialists. We had 22 program analyst vacancies, but they seem to be kind of scattered across a couple of different divisions. So the two that jumped out to me were energy program specialists and environmental protection specialists. Is there something specifically challenging about those roles, or is there something that would explain why of the 60, at least 50%, it's more like 2/3 are categorized within two groups, that's where your vacancies
Right.
are?
So for in terms of environmental protection specialists, that's a big chunk of our overall staff. They're just about almost, I don't know, a significant large
Mhm.
number of our positions are identified as environmental protection specialists. It's a generalist type title.
Mhm.
So EPS can be in hazardous waste, can also be in water protection, could be anywhere.
Okay.
It's just a general title for EPS. So as a whole, that may be a large number, but that number is actually spread out over the entire agency. So our Environmental Services Administration have EPSs. Our Natural Resources Administration have EPSs, and those are our two largest administrations. So although that number may be 22, that may be spread out over two administrations that have roughly over 200 people in them. So that title is the title that's misleading versus the actual positions.
Okay. All right. That's what it looks like on paper.
Yes.
Is that there's something about a
Yes.
specific division or type, but if that's a more general and broad description of an overall title, that makes more sense.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Here's something you can get to brag about. All right, so looking at a lot of the hires that DOE has made, compared to some of the other agencies that when we go through this exact same number, DOE has a very high percentage that are DC residents. 70% are DC residents, and we don't always see that. And so I think that's great. I applaud it. I would think that might be related to the folks that this is where they live and work and raise a family, and so they care deeply about these issues, and that's why they're drawn to it. Maybe you want to say just the leadership of the agency attracts people from DC into it.
And I'm not going that far. No.
What do you help credit to the hiring, I think, of a higher percentage of DC residents, which is a goal we all want within this agency? I'm not going to compare you to others. Just why do you think you're being successful with it?
I think you hit it on the head. People recognize this type of work, they want to be a part of it. And so normally when we go through applications or put a position out, we get a lot of DC residents that apply because they, I live here. This is the environmental stuff. I want to be a part of this. How can I be a part of that? And so we do get a large volume of DC residents that apply for all of our positions. So it's just, I believe, like you said, the nature of the work, the fact that people want to be a part of that transition, part of that protecting my community, and that's what tracks them there. And usually they're very qualified candidates, so we bring them on. And even in our lower positions, working through a lot of these, like the summer program and those, where we hire from those programs, those individuals come in at that level and they're willing to learn. I may not have an environmental degree, but if you bring me in as a grade 9, I'll learn it. And we're very receptive to bringing in people and teach them, because a lot of what we do in some instances, you're going to learn it on the job anyway. You don't have to necessarily have that strong a background in it, but we can teach it to you. And so we like to just give people that opportunity and they take advantage of it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. One of the things that jumped out to me in the pre-hearing responses was that when we looked at our collective bargaining agreements with DOE, AFGE Local 2725, their agreement's been in holdover since 1990. This is question 10, page 5. I was in middle school in 1990. That feels like an exceptionally long time to be in a holdover status. There might be a rational reason as to why, but are there plans to update that agreement? Why would we have an agreement that's been held over since 1990?
So I believe that question probably was not answered properly. right? There are current contracts with all the unions in place,
Mhm.
and those are what we follow. So I'm thinking that particular one, they didn't cite the current contracts, because all the union workers at our agency are under current contracts. They're not under that particular one cited. Whatever the newest
Okay.
version would be is what we're under. So I just believe that question was.
Got it. Let's
Was
follow
that
up
correct?
after the hearing.
Absolutely,
We'll clarify that.
Yep.
The last question, I'm gonna turn to Counselor Parker. Mr. Burdick, looking at SEU vacancies, how many vacancies do we have at the SEU right now? And how are they impacting operations?
So currently, I think we have two, possibly three open positions. I'd have to get you, I can get you an exact follow-up after this, but and just to follow on DOEE, we have 46 direct DCSE employees, VIC employees in the district office, 33 of which are DC residents.
Okay, got it. All right. Thank you very much. Counselor Parker, welcome. Let me turn to you.
Thank you, Chairperson Allen, and it's good to see you again, Director. It's been a while. First, I want to start by thanking you all for all the work that you do. I know in these hearings, sometimes it feels like we're raising concerns and criticisms, but there's a lot to celebrate as well. And I just want to acknowledge the hard work that DOE is putting in every day. I wanted to start by focusing on our policies for air pollution permits, odor control plans, and related enforcement actions. And so there's going to just be a series of questions here, just FYI. So what divisions or components of DOEE are responsible for issuing and enforcing air permits and odor control plans?
Right, so that falls under our air quality division. Within that division, there's 3 branches. So we have a enforcement and compliance type branch, and then there's also a permitting branch. That permitting branch what writes the permits to all the different entities in the city.
Yep.
Those permits that are then written, the inspection and enforcement branch works off that list to enforce the conditions of those permits. And so that entire team, the AQD team, operates within odor control, Title V, Chapter 2, all those permits are originated from that group and enforced by that group.
And so under that 1 branch, 3 divisions, how many FTs are under that branch?
How many? 32.
32. As a follow-up, I'm not going to ask you on the spot, but it would be helpful under those different branches, if you could say which
We can, yeah, we have that number.
FTs are.
Yes.
Is DOE's current level of staffing sufficient to keep up with the air permitting and odor control work across the district?
So with regard specifically to the permitting component, one of our senior permit writers just retired, I think last month, January. He retired in January. So now we're down 1. So that leaves, we had just gotten a new position that we're trying to get filled. We had 3 on board, but right now, while we're trying to fill the 1, that leaves us 2. Now we'll be backfilling that position. So you have a manager that should have had 4 FTEs. Right now, he only has 2 FTEs in the permitting group.
Okay, so you have 2
I have 2 right now.
filled and you're working to fill another.
Correct. So we were at 3 until 24.
I got it.
We did get an additional FTE now, but so it would have brought us up to 4, which would have increased our capacity. But now we're down to 2 because we had the retiree.
And realistically speaking, how long do you think it might take to fill those 2?
Well, the one that was the new position is already being in the recruitment process. Hiring process has been occurring on that one. The retiree, like I said, just retired last year, so that package to be put together and should go out in the next month or so.
Okay.
They are specialty positions, so they are a little bit more challenging to hire, but I would assume that they will get filled. They will both hopefully get filled this fiscal year.
So just coming back to that question, with the 2 FTEs you have in place, is that sufficient? It sounds like you're saying no,
No.
which is why you're trying to hire more
Correct.
individuals.
Correct.
Got it. As it relates to very specific entities in Ward 5, thinking Fort Myers, How many years have lapsed since the air quality permits for Fort Myers asphalt plant in Eckington and Brentwood were up for renewal? And this was a question that we brought up last year as well.
So the permit has a lapse. I believe the permit has just been extended. Has a new permit been issued? I would have to get back to you, but
It
they
was
are,
my understanding
okay.
that because they were grandfathered in, they were grandfathered into some clause, they hadn't received an updated permit. Or they didn't have an updated.
let me get back to you on that one, because I thought they are under whatever permit they was. They didn't have a new one issued yet.
Okay.
So they were operating under the current permit that they do have.
Do you know how many months have passed since DOEE has released a draft permit for one of those plants?
I do not have that information on hand, but I can get that for you.
Well, I will just say, less of a question, that it is really important. The reason why this is now year 3, we're coming back, is not that we want to pick on Fort Myer, but it is because you have a pollutant in the heart of Eckington, in the heart of Brentwood, that has essentially been allowed to operate with impunity in our community. And I think that permitting process is a way for us to have a check on the system and ensure that residents have a knowledge about how that plant is being operated, but also what controls should be in place for odor, but also air pollution and other things.
I understand.
Yep.
And so just to be, we're talking about their air permit, not their odor control plan, correct? Or both?
I am talking about their air quality permit.
Right.
It is my understanding at the Brentwood location, there was supposed to be an odor control permit, but I would say both.
Right, yeah, so it's odor control plan, and then there's the permit.
The air quality.
Gotcha.
Permit, yes. All right, to your credit, I would say DOEE recently issued and later updated its odor control plan regulations to help improve
Yes.
quality of life issues for those residents that live near these types of facilities, like in Eckington and Brentwood, but it's not exclusive to those neighborhoods. How many odor control plans have been approved to date by DOEE?
I know as many, but I gotta get you a specific number. So since that regs have started, I know for the last couple of years, we've been issuing odor control plans. I just need to get you the exact number.
Okay, if
But
you
we have to
could you ballpark it? Is it less than a dozen? Is it?
I would put it around a dozen.
Okay,
Yeah,
across the city.
yes.
Got it. And then when you follow up on that as well, could you estimate how many facilities are out of compliance with
Yeah.
their odor control regulations? I would be remiss not to mention Ivy City. I'm sure Commissioner Rhodes is watching this, and the NEP factory, which we've had many discussions about. So there are many areas across
Yes.
Ward 5 where this is of importance. Do you have a sense of what parts of the city are most impacted by delays in processing these permits and odor control? So I know you're going to find the number, but generally speaking, do you have a sense of where these plans are being focused in the city?
So the plans are just focused where those businesses would be. So, Buzzard Point, because of the concrete plant down in that area, certain larger construction projects may have an odor, sorry, that's the dust plans, getting confused. Those are dust plans, but so we will be looking at the different projects, different businesses, and just knowing what that environment is, we would then look at if they need to have an odor control plan or even a dust plan, depending if it's a construction site. Actually, it's one right outside my window. They're doing they're finally demolishing the old DCHA building.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have a demister running as they do the deconstruct. So that's part of their dust control plan. So for construction projects, we normally see how that goes. For odor control plans, again, sometimes it's based on input from residents that call in. We'll go, inspector will go and look at that business. We have this device called a sniffer, and they can determine whether there's excessive levels of odor.
Mm-hmm.
And that may warrant us having that conversation with those businesses if we can identify the business itself to that they may have to we'll have that conversation, talk about having
And
to
that's
execute
the
an odor
number-
control plan.
That's the number that will be helpful to know, like how
Okay.
many of those businesses are out of compliance that you've requested to further mitigate to come in compliance with those plans.
Okay.
And then for Ward 5 specific
Mhm.
locations, and you probably know the ones, Fort Myer and Eckington, Fort Myer, and the substation in Brentwood, and
Yes.
then around NEP and Ivy City, but we will follow up about that.
Absolutely.
I'm running out of time, but I did want to pivot to our air pollution laws. In what ways generally, in about 40 seconds, could we improve our air pollution laws in the district? And I know that's.
Yeah, that's too much
lofty
for 40
question,
seconds.
but
I would welcome having a more
Is there
thorough
one
discussion about
specific
that.
thing you would name for how we might improve treating air pollution in the district?
I can't think of anything other than, following current law that is.
Okay.
Because it boils down to, it's more hyper local. I mean, that's why the whole purpose of the hyper local monitoring that we're doing now. Because at a higher level, when you look at the city level, the air is, meeting the standards we need to meet.
Yes.
It's when you start getting down into the neighborhoods, down
That's
into
fair.
street level, is where actions need to be taken. And so how do we move from this level here?
And I would be
And-
remiss,
Yeah.
I agree completely. I would be
Yeah.
remiss without saying, and those communities are often in wards 5, 7, and 8, where we're seeing those hyper local issues.
And that
we-
may be the area that we need to look at.
That's
Is
right.
is hyper, how do you take regulations that are written at a state level and bringing it down to that level? Because that's where the issues are moving more towards, is those local communities versus the state level.
Okay, I have some more questions for you, but I'm out of time for this round. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Director Jackson, let me turn to utility affordability for a minute. So turn to LIHEAP. Want to kind of talk a little bit about our residents' knowledge and access to LIHEAP, as well as our utility affordability program. And we had a good conversation with DC Water. They're hearing about some of the new programs they have. That I'm frankly not convinced a lot of people even know about, but can really make a big impact on their budget. They talked about one of their programs was at the most number of people. It was the largest of their utility assistance programs. When I asked how many people were in it, they said 808 people. If that's the largest bucket, we're not getting the job done of making sure people know how to have access to this. So let's talk about LIHEAP for a second. When in your pre-hearing responses, you note that the agency spent an additional $2.3 million for LIHEAP, while at the same time saying overall funding for LIHEAP is not in deficit. Can you help me understand what happens here? Why the agency took the step? Is it a reprogramming? Because when I hear we have to spend an additional 2.3 because of the need, but then we're not in deficit. Maybe in my mind, what I'm hearing is you were short 2.3, you identified 2.3, so you had to add in the 2.3 to make sure you could meet the need. Is your comment about saying not in deficit because we were able to identify additional dollars to cover the need? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yes, sir. So the primary driver for LIHEAP is the initial federal funds that we would receive. So we receive a certain level of federal funding, and then that's the funding that's used to fund the program. Once that funding is expired, we would then have to add in local funds to continue the program in terms of assisting residents. The way it has happened in the past several years, when they had ARPA dollars, we would get our normal, like roughly $11 million. But then we would get an additional tranche of say 6 or 7 million. And that normally carried us from fiscal year to fiscal year. So normally LIHEAP runs from fiscal year to fiscal year. The funding would normally, under those last conditions, the last 3 years, was addressed with federal dollars. Prior to that, Mayor Bowser put extra local funds in, and that again carried us through the fiscal year. So every year we kind of go through that exercise from October 1 to about March, April. We know we have enough funding there depending on the burn rate as we track it per month. And so we always look for, okay, we may run out of federal dollars on this date. And let's now pivot and look internally in the agency and see if there's additional funds that we can apply to LIHEAP to continue driving that number further out. And then, and when I say ends, it's more or less not taking any more applications. So if we're going to run out of funding or run out in June, that means I cannot take any more applications in June. I can pay what's in the queue. So if I still have several thousand in the queue or several hundred in the queue, I can continue to process those payments and get those out the door. And I know I have the funding in place to do that. And so now that would take me like through, if that's June, that's going to take me about September. Normally you're in the warmer months, so you're in a better place. Plus, we're already then at that point, starting our work for getting prepped for the next fiscal year. So we're doing outreach, we're sending out flyers, letting people know the program comes back online in October and prepare that way. So from the time the federal dollars are going to be exhausted, we're looking at what do we have internally within the agency that could be applied to LIHEAP that could then carry that program an additional X amount of time. And again, that's based on burn rate. We have our highest burn rate between October and January. Of course, then it starts dying down, but that 4 months right there, you're getting 70 to 80% of your assistance is coming in that short time frame. So October 1, we're already in the hole in terms of processing applications because they're already right there waiting for us to start. And so, but that's how the process works. I don't know what deficit is not the right word. It's just that federal funds in, how do we now supplement those federal funds? And it's more of a supplementation. In the first place, we look is within our own budget to see what we can do there. How far will that get me? Because we're kind of looking for a soft patch before we have to go back to October comes in.
Okay. Stick with LIHEAP for a little bit. So the DC auditor had identified several issues and made recommendations when they did sequential audits of the federal LIHEAP grant awards in FY22 and FY23. The auditor had found that DOE was not performing a review of all applications. DOE's policy was to instead perform secondary reviews of at least 25% of all applications each fiscal year. However, but there was no documentation of how those policies procedures were implemented. So just kind of stopping there for a moment. Can I confirm, does that mean that the LIHEAP programs largely run through a vendor with DOE monitoring the vendor's performance? Or when you say we're reviewing the applications, that is DOE staff that are reviewing the applications?
Correct. So staff so you have certain, all staff is processing applications. Another member of the staff will review the applications that were processed by another staff member.
Okay.
So I have two energy processors, want to do his
A bit of a QA process. You've got
It's a QA process,
Okay.
correct. It's a QA process. And the manager also will then sit and go behind her processors and review their applications. And then they hold meetings
Do
as
we
a
do
team to
every
do that.
application or do we do a percentage of?
They do a percentage. It's the volume that comes in
Right.
so great that they can't afford to do every application because essentially you'd be cutting the staff in half is actually doing the processing.
Okay. And what is our, do we do on 25% of the applications? We do it on 10% of the applications? Do you have a goal? Like, is there an agency goal of like, I want to have.
We
that
do have a
secondary
procedure in place. The team does have a procedure in place. I don't know it off the top of my head, but they do have a procedure in place. I know the number that was cited in the audit, they do better than that. The managers are more focused on the review process now than they were. And they do it as a team effort. So it's higher than the 25%, but I would have to get back with you with the actual procedure and how
Okay.
that works. So
All
we
right.
could do that.
Got it. And stick with LIHEAP, in our pre-hearing responses, you identified a MOU with the Office of Unified Communications, OUC, regarding LIHEAP related services, which was signed on November 29th, 2023. What exactly is OUC doing to assist the LIHEAP program office at DOE? Or is it just, they're simply making a referral when someone calls 311?
No, so
DOE?
so actually they have access to our processing system that we use, ECOS. And so if a resident calls and say, hey, I submitted my application, I want to know if it's approved, they can actually go in and see whether their application is approved. They have enough access to the system to tell whether it's a yay or nay. And then that takes pressure off them having to call staff directly, DOE staff directly, asking that question. Plus, OUC has access 24/7, whereas staff doesn't work 24/7. So if they're getting calls off hour, they can handle those calls. If they need to transfer, then they could transfer to us. But the purpose of having OUC there is to assist with being able to access the system to provide information to residents.
As in they're actually enrolling people, or
No.
they're just giving a referral?
Well, they can give referrals. They can also check to see whether the person's been approved for their application
Mhm.
or what the status of their application is.
Okay.
But they don't do the actual enrollment. That's done purely by DOE
Okay, so what I'm
staff.
trying to get is, so OUC charges you $374,000 every year for this service. I'm trying to understand what service they are providing for that $374,000. Because I'll tell you, we get calls just in my office from OUC where they're just referring people that call for LIHEAP help, and they just send them to my office, which we obviously can't enroll them. We have to then in turn to does that sound like $375,000 worth of support that they're just checking the system to say your application's approved or it's not?
No, it doesn't. But so I'm gonna throw in my second lifeline,
Uh-huh.
and I'll bring up my deputy, and she's going to give you the details because that's where we're at now. So that's cool.
All right. And if you would just introduce yourself for the record too. And good afternoon. There you go.
Good afternoon. I am Danielle Wright, and I am the Deputy Director for our Utility Affordability Administration. And so we have an MOU with the Office of Unified Communication to be our first line of contact to schedule appointments, as well as to receive an update on LIHEAP applications. As it pertains to the funding within the MOU, it supports 6 FTEs. And in terms of the cross training, so number one, we have a monthly meeting with the OUC Director of Public Programs, and then we also conduct annual and quarterly trainings of their staff. So if there are any updates on the program, we're very proactive in making sure that we're communicating those changes, as well as being a point of contact with the very competent management staff within the LIHEAP program. So that's the reason for the amount of the MOU.
That's very helpful. Thank you. So it's funding 6 FTEs at OUC,
Correct.
and they are just handling, like, is that their full-time job? Just handling LIHEAP?
So it's my understanding that they support LIHEAP, but oftentimes when we think about the LIHEAP program, they may be receiving other questions across the board in the district related to public assistance programs. But what we do is ensure that they have the cross-training within our eligibility system. They are very astute and familiar with our programs, and we're sending scripts and other information so that they have what they need to provide accurate information.
I appreciate that. Could we add into the training, not to have call takers send people asking to sign up for LIHEAP to their council members, because we can't do that. And then we have to turn it right back around and send it back out.
I hear you.
I appreciate it. My time's up on this round, but thank you. Let me turn to Councilor Parker.
I'm going to continue with the focus on utilities, which has been a priority for me. My understanding, Director, is that your staff has been working on automatic enrollment and energy assistance programs. And can you just share what's the progress you've made on that?
You want it? Because these two are the people that actually work in that arena that you're talking about. So Danielle?
And so I'll provide an update and then Nick can provide an update as well. So we're looking, so just an overview. So part of our eligibility assistance process is enrolling people when they apply for LIHEAP into our utility discount programs. But we are looking at expanding the scope. So there's automatic enrollment in other public assistance programs like SNAP and TANF. And so a lot of research has been done internally to look at how other states operate that process, best practices, cost analysis. And so we're in that preliminary phase of discussion internally as well with our key partners. And I'll also send it over to Nick to add anything in addition.
Before Nick jumps in, so is it safe to say the progress for automatic enrollment and utility assistance is tied to this automatic enrollment and other beneficiary programs like SNAP and TANF?
Correct. So for automatic enrollment, if you are eligible for, the intention is if you're eligible for SNAP and TANF, you would be automatically enrolled into our utility discount programs to really help and focus on reducing your energy and utility burden.
Yeah, I mean, that was a great summary. I would just add, as Danielle mentioned, we've got a joint team on kind of her side and our side looking into what other states are doing. So there's programs that have done this in Maryland, New York, Massachusetts, some at a state level, some at a locality level, where they basically take, folks that have put the time in, usually through paperwork, to enroll in again, say a SNAP program. And then on the back end, using, integrated data systems, use that to automatically enroll households. And there's a bunch of important questions about how do we notify households that we're doing this? If someone wants to opt out, if for some reason they don't want to be in the utility discount program, they should have the right to do that. For a lot of that work, we're working very well. So for all this work, we're working very closely with the Office of People's Counsel. And so actually they were the ones that kind of they didn't bring the issue, but they brought sort of the fundamental motivator for this, which is, if you look at your utility bill, there's a lot of different charges, and residents that are enrolled in utility discount programs are exempt from some of those charges. And so OPC was saying like, okay, are we doing the best that we can to make sure that the various charges showing up on people's bills are not hitting our low-income households as much as we can. And that's kind of kicked off a process that's been going for about a year where, we've been working to sort of figure out the mechanics. So we have, partnerships with OPC. We're also in active conversations with the Department of Human Services and the Department of Healthcare Finance, because at some level, this boils down to a big complicated data exercise. We think it's doable. We just got to make sure we do it the right way.
And what is the expected timeline to conclude this expedition of figuring out if it's feasible or not?
I would say that's still to be determined.
Okay. Is there a goal by which you would like to see this in place? Like this fiscal year, by the end of the calendar year?
So I don't think we're going to have it in place by the end of the fiscal year. That was actually one of the goals that I had hoped we'd have. But as I've talked to folks on our teams that know the mechanics of how this works and have looked at what other states have done, there's some steps and they're just going to take time. So for example, we may need to work with the SNAP team to ensure we've gone through all the processes, checked all the boxes to be able to use SNAP information for automatic enrollment. That process might take a year given, all the other work that the SNAP TANF teams are doing. So my hope, I think, you can tell me if you share this goal, Danielle, I would hope that by the end of this fiscal year, we have a pretty clear plan for how to do this. And we've lined up all the component pieces. We've had questions from various parties about whether, for example, there needs to be any kind of enabling legislation to do this work. There may well be, and I think that would be another step that we need to come back to. But does that sound about reasonable to have the plan by the end of the fiscal year?
I see why they invite Nick to the panel. He manages expectation. And so thank you for that. It goes without saying, anything the committee can do to support, please let us know. This too has been a priority for me, ensuring that we remove barriers for people to access these essential programs. But I'm glad that you all are being proactive and trying to explore what's possible. So thank you for that. I wanted to pivot to flood mitigation and flood mapping director. As you know, Ward 5 experienced a catastrophic flood a couple of years ago now, and it is expected that these type of events will continue to happen. A key step that was identified after the Rhode Island flood was that DOEE would work on interior flood risk mapping. What progress has been made to date on that?
So I actually had a chance to see the palette database that was created for this. And they showed it to us, or my team showed it to me maybe 3 weeks ago. So it's quite impressive, but it actually shows that area, right? You could put an area in, put the information in, it tells you what a flood will look like, what will be affected. Everything that we're asking for in terms of interior flooding, it would give you that information.
Right.
So right now, it's still kind of in that beta testing mode, but it is on track to be released soon. We just haven't put it out for
So
like
the
public.
natural question I'm going to ask
is very soon. I would
what's the
say by end of
timeline?
fiscal year,
Okay.
it'll be up. because
And
they're
that will be
close.
available to the public.
Yeah.
And then how?
I'm not sure of all the rules. My team ain't told me all the rules, but it will be something that will be interactive, I believe.
And then how do you envision that mapping, informing, planning, and policy making across the district? One agency I can imagine you will be working with is Department of Buildings, as they're thinking of their certificate of occupancy processes, but there is any
Well, yeah, you
number
know,
of agencies and
exactly,
teams.
exactly.
But like, how do you envision that mapping working and informing policy?
I think it just works like partly with that whole flood task force. That's part of it. So now you're bringing in, because it, you know, flood rate insurance is affected. Office of planning is affected. All these things can be affected. So anybody can just see that information versus not having that internal information like in the past. So working with sister agencies, I think the information is going to be very vital for how the city proceeds because they'll have a lot more information in those arenas.
Are you willing to commit to meeting with my team so we can explore with you the beta version of that?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Are you willing to commit to meet with me and my team so we can explore the beta version of that flood mapping feature?
Let's see.
You have to, is the mayor texting you?
No. My team's been texting me all
No,
kind of
I'm
stuff.
teasing.
So,
I'm
you
totally
know,
teasing.
but you know, like I said, I think it's something that needs to be explored. And I think your team can access it. We just need to finish up our internal work.
Yeah, we don't even need to
I know,
access,
you
but
just
I would
wanna
love to see
see
it.
it,
So
exactly.
I would,
Yeah.
if willing, we will follow up and see if we can.
Yeah, like I
schedule
said,
a
when they showed it to me, they were a little tentative about it because they said this is really like just hot off the presses.
Okay.
So I know they're still a little jittery about it, but once they get a little
Nick
comfort.
is texting, managing expectations.
But
I'm
one of
teasing.
the thing I want to add, because my team just sent me that, is the rulemaking process for updating our flood hazard regulations and mapping will inform this as well. So we're doing some rulemaking work there. And another, just to follow up with the LAHEAP question that was sent to me, part of the results of the audit, which was closed in 23, our managers, our branch chief managers do a quarterly training with staff on the whole process of how they do the applications and stuff. So that's another component of ensuring that we're, hitting that accuracy with regards to applications.
Got it. And then I'll just end on this question, going back to air quality monitoring. One, again, I appreciate the work your team is doing, expanding monitoring. And my team, we've been tracking the results and a few things stand out. So one, in Ivy City, it seems like residents and neighbors who have expressed concerns are vindicated because air quality levels are compromised despite rhetoric that suggests everything is safe. Also, there is evidence that there are harmful pollutants in that area in Ivy City in particular. And I know the EPA weighed in and said, yes, they're harmful, but they're within appropriate levels, which I think is foolish, frankly. Do you share the observations that in a community like Ivy City, that air quality is compromised? And when we have concrete evidence to show that that is the case, like in Ivy City, what should DOEE's responsibility be? What should be the district's responsibility to residents in that neighborhood?
So in that area specifically, I was on that EPA call that the last meeting they did with the community. And because air quality is complicated, we do know that that area is challenged because of all the different things going on there. And that's part of the challenge is there's so much going on. If I focus in on Ivy City specifically, right? You have New York Ave, you have the bus garage, you have the trucks, a lot of things. And I know we do discuss NEP. That is one, but that's one of multiple potential sources in that area. What the hyperlocal monitoring gives us is an opportunity to try to really narrow in on what those particular businesses or sources can be, and then try to address them. Now, one source that cannot be addressed right now, at least I don't know how it can be addressed, is just the traffic flow that ebbs and flows on New York Ave
Yeah.
during rush hour periods, right? So that, do I take that out of the equation in terms of overall air quality? I can't. But at the same time, how do I mitigate it? That becomes a challenge. So we're constantly trying to figure out a best way to mitigate the issues that are occurring in these communities that are highly affected, because like you said, the hyperlocal money tells you that. You can't deny what you're seeing from the monitors that are
That's
there.
right.
So because of that, it just becomes now a greater challenge to how do we figure out the best way to maneuver in that area. And because it is such a small area, we have a better chance. Maybe we move away from trying to control the exterior component, and maybe it's something else that needs to be done, more specifically in that area. I'll go back to when they did the work at Buzzard Point. We knew when they constructed the stadium, there was going to be excessive issues there, and we worked with the owners or the builders of the stadium to work with the community there to provide them additional protections because of the work that was being done. Maybe that's an approach that can be applied to somewhere like an Ivy City, where working with businesses and the community working together, how can they come together instead of butting heads? How do they come together to come up with a solution that helps all of them? But I think kind of looking at it from that approach, like, hey, we know we have a problem now. It's going to take all of us to get that solution. Owners, business owners, and community versus butting heads.
I'm well over my time. Thank you.
Mhm.
I will follow up about that. And I agree that looking at this more comprehensively makes sense for the entire community. But thank you. And thank you, Chairperson Ellen.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Councilmember. I want to turn to some issues around water quality for a moment. DOE is scheduled to begin cleanup efforts in FY 26, starting in the Washington Channel and then concluding at the main district segments of the Anacostia River. At least that's the way that I thought we had it the last time we talked about this and briefed through it. Your pre-hearing responses note that DOE's had some issues finding a laydown area for the dredged sediments from the cleanup. That's question 69, page 52, in case we need to reference anything. Can you say more about the barriers to finding that laydown area for processing that dredged sediment? What's the pathway to move forward?
So in terms of the sediment project, that is our greatest challenge right now. We're really so well versed on the whole sediment project, of course, but the greatest challenge that we have with that project right now is being able to actually address the sediments once we remove them from the river. Having the space large enough can accommodate that. So because most of the land along the river is owned by NPS, we've been working with them to try to determine a good place that we can use. Laydown area, one of the areas being considered, it was one of the lots of RK Stadium because it's right beside the river. There's a lot of advantages to using that. It now becomes a timing issue with the other work that now can occur there. So we're in discussions with DEMPED and how we can incorporate all of this together, since it all goes to the common good.
Actually, to help, because I'm going to have folks that are watching and aren't quite sure what we mean when we say laydown area. Could you also just briefly explain what's happening when you're taking that dredged sediment?
Sure.
Is the expectation that it's sitting there for a temporary basis? Is this a permanent storage of contaminated dredging? Just make sure people know what that means.
Sure. So when you're doing the dredging project, when you remove that dredged material, comes out with a lot of water. So normally there's a bag, essentially a big, incredibly large black plastic bag that everything is pumped into. Once it's pumped into that bag, then you slowly remove the water from that bag to allow just the sediment to remain. That water, depending, it's tested, treated, and then it potentially put back. But either way, once all that stuff is pushed into the bag, that's your sediment. And then this is all temporary. It can range from 6 to 7 months, depending on how long your dewatering takes and drying out of the sediment before the sediment can then be removed to a disposal facility. But that sediment is pumped from the riverbed onto a barge. From the barge is then pumped onto these bags. These bags are usually probably the length, close to a length of a football field, 50, 60, 70 feet, right? So because of the size of these bags, you need a large space in order to lay it down to actually have it pumped in, and then have the treatment component of the treatment equipment there as well to treat the water that you're pulling out of the sediment. So that's the process, and having a large enough area to accommodate that type of equipment is the challenge for us right now, having the space.
Does the laydown area have to be in the district?
Because you're removing the sediment, you're trying to get it as close to the river as possible because of the fact that the further you gotta pump the sediment, the more it's gonna be, the more cost is gonna be associated with it. So you try to keep, otherwise, the only other option, which we know about, but we really don't want to consider right now, is having to do this all on a barge.
Right.
That makes it almost, that's an incredible challenge to do that on a barge.
Also blocks the waterways from other uses. Okay.
So having a lay down area where you can put this equipment, so RFK is one consideration. We were also looking at the maintenance yard for NEPS has a maintenance yard that's located on the Anacostia. That was another potential source. So right now, we're still trying to narrow down or get a space that will accommodate the work.
Okay.
And I really can't do the work
Right. You
until
gotta have, so
I have
when,
that
when does
place.
this get settled?
We've been in discussions for about the last 4 months trying to determine a spot. Right now, we're, like I said, we're talking with DEMPED to see how we're working with the timeline, the big timeline. And we say we need 12 to 24 months of that timeline. And we just recently started those discussions saying, okay, here's what we need. Can that be backed into the bigger master plan?
Right.
And so that's what we're trying to figure out. But
Okay.
that's the linchpin holding the project. And
When,
that's quite
when
frustrating.
do we hit the pinch point that it impacts your FY 26 plans of getting this started? In other words, how much more clock do we have until a decision's got to get made? Or else we're no longer in FY 26, we're now bumping to FY 27 now.
Based on my conversations with my project manager, I got maybe 7 months.
Let's cut that in half. All right. Also thinking about our rivers, I think one of the spaces that DOE has done a phenomenal job managing our streams, our tributaries, the waterways, trying to remove trash that ends up in our river. And we certainly experienced back when we'd pull the trash out, and the number one item we'd be pulling out were plastic bags. We came up with policy solutions that helped dramatically reduce those single-use plastic bags. Now, of course, we see other items that are in there. DOE reports annually on the amount of trash removed. But of the trash collected, what items make up the highest percentage of the trash items removed?
So the highest percentage is bottles, I believe, and something else. But before you take me down the details, I want to bring up I'll preemptive and bring up my NRA deputy so that he can help out with these questions as well.
Excellent, excellent. The team effort. And if you could just introduce yourself for the record.
Yes, Steve Sari, Deputy Director for Steve Sari, Deputy Director, Natural Resources Administration.
Excellent, thanks. All right, so what we're looking at is you guys reported out in our pre-hearing questions the trash data in terms of the pounds coming out, right? So the Clean Teams program, 3.4 million pounds of trash. Our skimmer boats, 336 pounds of trash. Our trash traps, 5,700 pounds. Hickey Run sediment trap alone, over 2,000 pounds. What we're trying to kind of get a sense of is what is the item or items that are the highest proportion of trash items that we're pulling out?
So it is correct that the director said right now, in terms of what we're tracking, bottles are the number one item.
And just so we know, when we say bottles, we mean like this kind of single-use plastic bottles.
Single-use plastic bottles, yes. I do want to caveat that in that it's only in our trash trap data that we're actually collecting and sorting and figuring out the types of trash that are there, because it takes a lot of effort to do that. And those trash traps, by their nature, what they do is they capture floatable debris. So it's a specific type of trash that is being captured there. So it might not be a completely accurate depiction of the overall trash going into the Anacostia.
Yeah. Would we and I do agree with you, certainly the amount of work it takes to sort through, to categorize, that's a lot, and to do that on 3+ million pounds, would be difficult. Is it, how should I look at what your experience is in the trash traps you're talking about in the streams and tributaries? Is that a reasonable assumption to say that's fairly indicative of the type of trash that, of especially the floating trash, that we're able to get out of the river? In other words, would I see something different in a stream and tributary with a trash trap than I might find in another part of the river?
No, I think that it's a relatively indicative.
Yeah, okay. And what are the types of things we should be concerned about that are not captured in a trash trap? So the things that go underneath the water, can you share anything about the impact on the river and the health of the water from those items?
Off the top of my head, the things that I think about are small items, microplastics, cigarette butts, things that are not tend to be captured because of the size of the netting in the trash traps that would pass through, but still end up in our waterways and end up in Fish and Wildlife, and then sometimes get passed on to folks who might be eating that Fish and Wildlife.
Okay, thanks. And the skimmer boats that we have, my recollection is DC Water actually operates the two,
Yes.
but we still have two, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Any changes to that relationship or agreement with DC Water, or you expect that those two ships will continue operating, removing trash through their skimmer boats?
I'm not, oh, go ahead. I'm not aware of any change, although it would not surprise me with the long-term control plan, the tunnels coming online, that might be something that they would be looking to say that we've done our job, we've controlled what's coming out of our pipes, and therefore we want to discontinue that. I hope that that's not the case.
And the other piece on the rivers, in recent springs after major rainfall events, we've had a lot of natural debris. So we've had logs and trees that come downriver. I know the Washington Channel, for example, we had at one point just completely clogged up with just a lot of natural debris. And we struggled with being able to get them out. So my recollection is we ultimately had to get the Army Corps of Engineers and have a whole partnership to come in and get some of that out. Is there anything that we've done differently, kind of seeing where we see our major rainfall events that also create a lot of natural debris that then ends up clogging our waterways, can actually create hazards for people that might be out on the water and in the rivers? Anything that we've done differently from a relationship with Army Corps of Engineers or others?
So we do have that relationship with Army Corps. So that event that you're speaking of did identify kind of a gray area for all of us. Army Corps is very specific in where and what debris they can take out. The skimmer boats also, reaching out to them in terms of what they can and can't do. And so, we end up having to, that specific incident, we end up bringing on a contractor and took care of that. But again, it was a learning thing. And so now working with the community down in that area to see what we could do in the future, it definitely put it on our radar, and it's something we're trying to address because it was a gray area that we were not, it was a gap.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah,
But
but
we feel like
we
we've
are
got-
looking at it, and now we do have a better plan in place if something else happens in the future. Yes.
All right, appreciate it. Let me turn to our Natural Areas Conservation Program. During last council period, there had been an effort to introduce legislation called the Office of Natural Area Conservation Establishment Act. That would establish a new office dedicated to managing forested areas and patches in the district. Under that bill, the UFD would keep its role as the district's arborists, and the new office would deal with invasive plants that are in or around our trees and forests. During the hearing on the bill, you'd flagged several concerns. First, the legislation potentially would duplicate with the specific office many functions DOE already performs, such as addressing the spread of invasive species. Second, it would risk overlapping with the functions of DDOT's Urban Forestry Division, which maintains trees on public land and monitors the district's larger forested areas. And third, it has some highly prescriptive coordination requirements regarding illegal dumping that could slow down DOE's existing enforcement efforts. During the hearing that we had last week, we heard from some residents who continue to advocate for that legislation. And want to see, has the agency's perspective on this changed at all? Have you worked with any of the stakeholders behind that legislative effort to make changes that you think might align better with the department and your perspective? In other words, any change from your side if we found that bill reintroduced?
I think we're just, waiting for an opportunity to discuss that bill if it gets reintroduced. But I think, as I was telling Councilmember Louis George, with that money, that kind of was like that seed money that allowed us, it kind of demonstrated some of the things we did want to pursue in terms of the work we was able to accomplish. But the Ms. Berson that spoke at the hearing did identify some areas that, again, once we started digging into it, I see where her concerns are. Understanding better now the ownership issues that people have, and I applaud that. I love when residents take control, saves us time, money, because we can't do it all. So I applaud her for that and her community for that. And I think we need to incorporate that if there's anything down the road that we need to do.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess part of me kind of questions, is it just a capacity issue? If we increased funding, absent of legislation, if we simply just better funded DOE's natural area conservation mandates, could we achieve some of the same outcomes?
Well, that's why I think, having that conversation on a larger scale in the hearing would be beneficial to kind of air some of those things out. But that was a good step in terms of us being able to test the waters.
Yeah. Well, I'm encouraging folks to have those conversations before we even have to have a hearing, right? Like, it would be great if there actually sounds like there's some mutual goals that we want to be achieved. I've been at this long enough to know sometimes the legislation doesn't actually have to get passed to make a difference. It can kind of help force the conversation, bring people together around common ideas. You don't get to pat yourself on the back that a bill got passed, but you actually accomplished what you sought to do.
Well,
So
I think
if that's a space where the different entities and stakeholders want to get engaged, I certainly support it. It sounds like you're very willing to sit down and do that too.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. Let me turn to one of our favorite topics and talk about BEPS for a moment. This is our Building Energy Performance Standards Program. Committee moved a package of reforms to the BEPS program to look at easing some of the administrative burdens on our buildings. Last year, we worked in collaboration with DOEE and many of our stakeholders. So last month, DOEE issued its first round of notice of violations for buildings that were non-compliant, which does include a $1,000 fine. And so I wanted to ask how many notices of violations we issue.
I think we have that number. Just one
If
second.
you don't have the exact number, we can certainly follow up after the hearing, if you have more of a ballpark, perhaps.
Yeah, well, as always, we can absolutely get you the exact number after the hearing, but let me see if I've got it.
While you're looking that up, I think
Sure.
I do think we continue to hear some heartburn surrounding the third-party verification requirement. DOEE supported maintaining the third-party verification for a number of reasons, including it might help building owners better identify the most appropriate compliance pathways. Now that, this is in place, did you find that to hold up? Do you continue to hear some of those heartburn concerns as well? How do you feel like this is impacted in practice?
Sure. And because I know I can go on too long, I'll give you the short version. If you want more details, let us know. But I think the short answer is it does hold up. So as requested or required in the law, we are pulling together a report on third-party verification and aim to have that to council by the April deadline. So, what I'm about to say is preliminary, but I think it's pretty consistent with what you'll see in the final report, which is that third-party verification is not creating any new standards. It's simply asking buildings to verify the information that they've submitted previously. And so when we've gone back and looked at what buildings have submitted for third-party verification, first of all, about 80% of buildings that are submitting benchmarking data have submitted third-party verification. So we're seeing pretty high rates of compliance, if you will. But I think more importantly than compliance, because that's not really the point is about what does this actually do? What does it do for us? It gives us a confidence that the information that we are using, through this regulatory program is accurate. But it's also giving the building owners confidence that the information they're submitting is accurate. And, so out of those third-party verifications that were submitted, we saw a substantial number of them go in and actually change their underlying data in the databases that support BEPS. and, you know, I won't sit here and say that all of those were in favor of the building owner, but in many cases they were. You know, they found that they had mismeasured, sometimes by hundreds of thousands of square feet, the size of their building. If you get the number right and that increases the size of your building, not in reality, but in the database, that actually makes your job complying for BEPS substantially easier. And that's what we're seeing, is that building owners are changing the information in the system, and that's a good thing. It's giving us all kind of collective confidence that the information is correct. We've also heard from building owners say, you know, I'm not going to say it's all of them, but a lot of them say, we actually appreciate that you're doing this third-party verification, because you think about it this way: if you're a building owner and you're actually putting in the time to get the process right in the first place, that takes you a little bit of time, costs you a little bit of money, but someone else is kind of throwing it together. That disadvantages you, the person who's sort of doing things right. And so by holding everyone to a consistent standards, I think what we hear from folks that were kind of doing the things right in the first place, they feel like it's actually a fairness issue for them. Like everyone's being held to the same standard that they're performing at. So anyway, I think we're seeing, I would argue, generally positive results. Again, not from everyone. It does come at a small cost to building owners, and but we'll get you the more detailed report when we have it complete.
All right, and that report is on track still for April?
Correct.
Okay. And then DOE had also been considering developing regulations to describe potential exemptions to the law. Where are you in the process of that, or are you looking to align that with your April report?
Yeah, so what we've been monitoring and in some ways waiting for is sort of the BEPS law to fully come into effect. You know the steps better than anyone. But in parallel to that, we've started conversations both internal to our team, Katie Bergfeld and her team, and also with, you know, folks outside the agency that have raised the issues around exemptions. And so, you know, as we've said before in similar forums, there were already processes in place for buildings experiencing, for example, financial distress, to seek and obtain an exemption. The bill sort of expanded in some ways, you know, what those exemptions mean, sort of pulling you out of the cycle, the first cycle of BEPS, rather than just giving you a delay. One of the things we're looking at right now is what's the most kind of efficient and effective way to clarify the rules around financial distress. Both how do we define that? Is our current definition sufficient? Is it going to work? And if we need to, you know, create more clarity or update rules, do we do that through a regulatory rulemaking process, or can we do that through sort of the extensive guidance documents that we already have around BEPS? And so that's kind of that's the process we're going through right now, is figuring out with our legal team what's the right way, what's the most efficient way, so that we're getting the information out to building owners expeditiously, but also making sure it's something that is clear to them and that we can stand behind.
Thank you. All right, then last couple of questions. I want to follow up on some of our public witnesses that we had. We had at the hearing last week, one person who came in expressed some frustrations around attempting to get mold removed from her home. In that case, they seemed concerned about remote inspections over a phone, which I do think you use from a technology standpoint to try to help get images and video. Has the department been able to follow up with that constituent to find out what the issue was and try to work towards a resolution?
Yes, so we have followed up with Mr. Jesus. Actually, we have followed up before the hearing and worked with her and got her concerns met. But she had already told me she was testifying, so that was inevitable. So it was all good. Again, I appreciate residents holding us accountable, and I appreciate if we make a mistake, we're going to own that mistake and we're going to make it right. And so I believe we made her right. And if not, I'm sure she'll send me an email after this hearing.
All right, I appreciate that. We also had another testimony that came regarding from Rachel Clark, who talked about EPS, not to be confused with BEPS. So EPS is the Environmentally Preferable Products and Services Program. So this comes from the Green Food Purchasing Amendment Act of 2021, which had DOE be the lead in implementing the EPS program. From the pre-hearing response, it looks like DOE's made some progress, but it seems like you also noted the most significant barriers were a large workload and a lack of a full-time FTE at OCP. to be able to kind of put these responsibilities in place. Am I capturing that correctly? And what are we doing to try to get the FTE there?
Just so that you can get the full picture, I'll want to invite my USA deputy up so she can give you the full enchilada on that.
Excellent. I don't want to leave any deputy out.
Well, unfortunately, my deputy for NRA is here, but I kind of covered his stuff, so I apologize for that, Colin, but we'll catch you next time. I'm sure you want to be up here.
I think that means he just had confidence in your answer, and if he didn't, he would have jumped right up.
So Dr. Lee Lorenzo.
Good afternoon, Maribeth DiLorenzo, Deputy Director for Urban Sustainability Administration. And what the director has said is absolutely correct, that the environmentally preferable products and services, we've made enormous strides. We have 2 FTEs at DOEE, and we have had a vacancy for some time that we are recruiting for. So that accounts for some of the capacity constraint. And we are having conversations with our sister agency, OCP, regarding their staffing. And I think more is more in this instance because it's a very large lift. As you know, it would require either the certification or waiver of all contracts over $100,000. And when we began this work, we realized that, there'd been a significant gap in staffing at OCP over some time, although there are some very dedicated and devoted people that we're working with closely, and we really appreciate that. But we are making up for time when EPS was not really staffed at the level that it should have been. So I would say that staffing, additional staffing capacity would be very valuable because, of course, we're all concerned with making sure that we're not adding additional time to procurements.
Right. Okay. So would it be fair to say that we are seeing sustainable purchasing increase? Is that a metric we're able to identify?
We are, and we can provide you some further information on that. We have done pilots with 2 particular agencies, and we've had some good results. We've built an internal data dashboard at this point, which is not something that the district had before. And we are looking in depth at where do we have false positives. So where do we have, for instance, our director spoke at some length about the Anacostia River Sediment Project, and those are very large contracts. And when we went back through, we realized that some of them were not qualified as environmentally preferable products and services, although they certainly are providing an environmental benefit to the district and should be classified as EPS. So there are a number of places where we're digging in like that and have really had some great results.
Got it. Okay. So would I be correct also, though, in understanding that to mean that from an OCP perspective, while you're recruiting for 1 FTE, it sounds like at DOEE, they still need to recruit or hire someone at OCP, and that filling those positions will help increase the scale of where we see this program's reach?
I think that's a fair assessment. I would rely on OCP to answer, and I believe they have actually this past week given some testimony in their oversight to the committee of the whole in that regard. But I would also note that it's like anything, as you peel the onion, you find out complexities that you didn't anticipate. I think the director mentioned that in terms of the, who would have ever thought about this staging area that we need for the sediment project. In this instance, I will just note for you, because I know that you are very detailed and thorough and have been a champion of EPS, that one of the things we've uncovered is that for green food purchasing, which as we know is not EPS, but is related to EPS and addressed in the same legislation, we've identified that all of the district's charter schools, that we do not have the data for them included in our schools purchasing report. And that indeed, as we all know, the hallmark of a charter school is that there's devolved or independence and a greater degree of authority. But it does appear to us in our initial investigations that we do not have any centralized view into the food purchasing for charter schools and perhaps for other elements of their procurement. So we have had some preliminary conversations with staff in OSSI and Deputy Mayor for Education. And that is an area where we may need to do some brainstorming to figure out how that legislation can help us achieve what the goals were as originally set.
That's a great point. I've certainly found reaching out to the charter school board itself is something that can be helpful too, to try to find ways to bring that into more compliance. So happy to partner with you guys if you need my help with that. So thank you. And then I think our last question, we also heard from McKenna Osborne at Children's Law Center. I think one of my colleagues spent a lot of time on lead, so I'm not going to go revisit some of the questions because I think she asked a lot of those and got that on the record. But DOEE reported 67 children were reported as having an elevated blood level in FY23. And these were new confirmed cases, but according to the oversight responses, the agency only received four referrals in the same year. So the numbers jumped out to me as being a little too far apart. Is that perhaps a reporting error of 67 in but 4 referrals? Or is there a discrepancy that I'm not quite following?
Yes, sir, that was a reporting error because of the way the numbers were divided between the two groups. So one thing I will add is, as we made this transition to Department of Health, there has been some confusion with regards to what went there and what stayed. And I think the lady from the Children's Law Center kind of mentioned that confusion. I believe you mentioned the confusion as well. So the easiest way to delineate how what happened is essentially the Healthy Homes branch is moving to DOH. That branch consists of the Healthy Homes team and then the children-led level program, the CLIP.
Mhm.
So elevated blood levels went there, and then the Healthy Homes went there. Lead enforcement for lead-based paint, lead permitting, those things stayed at DOE. So the way that I always think about it is if there was any attachment to the CDC grant, which primarily DOH has the bulk of the CDC grants, they went there. If it was more EPA related, it stayed with us. Is there still communication between them? Absolutely. So they're in communications. So, but when cases are reported from from lead enforcement group, that we find a house that had lead dust, and then that dust created an issue there, that refers over to the other program. They would then work with the children if there was children in our property. So that's why I believe the numbers are just not correct because of the way they were reported. And I believe we're working on trying to make sure that we get on the same page with our numbers in the future for that
Okay.
kind of thing.
All right. That can certainly be one of our follow-ups too from today is as you were able to kind of figure out and get the numbers aligned.
Mhm.
The other piece that we heard from Ms. Osborne was just around when we've got a kid who's testing positive for elevated lead levels, making sure we're just triggering all the things, all the interventions, they're coordinated. I think that's what I heard her talking about as well, is just the feel of disconnect, just to go to DOH for this, DOE for that, maybe DOB for this. And you're just trying to solve the problem, but we have too many cooks in the kitchen.
Well, and we've had that, we've had some good meetings with DOH. And we think we fixed that particular problem. There was an issue that occurred a few months ago that kind of raised our antennas on both sides. So myself and Director Dr. Bennett got together with our teams, and we definitely have a path forward to ensure that everything is more consistent as we move forward. So yep, we're definitely staying in touch with DOH about that.
Got it. Okay. Well, I look forward to hearing back
Mhm.
on that so that we've got that straight. So thank you very much. All right. I don't have any further questions. Any closing remarks from you, Director, before we wrap up?
For me to, no, again, thank you for allowing us to testify. Thank you to my deputies for being able to assist and answer the questions from you and the team committee. And again, just thank the residents for their input, for holding us accountable and allowing us to continue to be a high performing agency that we want to be. So thanks.
Thank you very much. And to SEU, I know the bulk of the testimony and questions today for DOEE, but certainly anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up?
No, just want to say thank you very much for all the support. We look forward to making continued progress on all these programs this fiscal year.
All right, fantastic. Well, Director Jackson, I appreciate your time to all your leadership team, and I'm sure every DOE employee is glued to the TV watching this back at the office as well. So we appreciate their hard work, and in particular on many of the shared goals where, frankly, it's the federal instability that is creating a lot of uncertainty and anxiety and frustration. We all know that we got to figure out how we're going to weather through that. But I know that we can count on the folks at DOE to keep the mission alive and keep pushing forward, and we're going to keep working on that together. So I appreciate that, but I want them to hear that appreciation as well. So thank you.
Thank
So
you,
this,
sir.
this is going to conclude the committee's performance oversight hearing on the Department of Energy and Environment, the Green Finance Authority, the Commission on Climate Change and Resiliency, and the DC Sustainable Energy Utility. Again, I want to thank everyone who provided testimony. The record for today's hearing will close on March 7th, 2025, and you can submit written testimony through the council's hearing management system at lims.dccouncil.gov/hearings. Until then, the next scheduled meeting of the committee will come on Monday, March 3rd, when the committee will hold a performance oversight hearing on the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, affectionately known as WMATA. There being no further business for the committee. The time is now 1:26 p.m. and this performance oversight hearing of the Committee on Transportation and the Environment is now adjourned. Thank you.